story.
I got hit. I was crossed back hit.
Ooh, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to season 4, episode 1 of Shot in Nostalgia, the way it used to be and the way you like it. I'm good old Mike Belcaster. As you can see, things are changed. We're dropping down. We're a little bit more into the past, riding that beautiful DeLorean. Again, I'm good old Mike Belcaster. Joining us for his first time here at Shot in Nostalgia, we got the man with the plan, the mullet man with the plan. Colton, get your shit out there, brother.
What's going on, Mike? Hey, it's me, Colton. You might have seen me around on the debate show. Caught me on Honor Society as well as new now Brace for Impact on Thursdays on the Tavern. You can find me at mullet.mania on Instagram and bumping around the Tavern shows. That's a pretty much only spot. So, because otherwise I'm pretty absent on the old social medias. So,
and it's so good to have you at the Kentucky Waterfall. Here's for Shot in Nostalgia 1994. Live from No Cell Studios at the Tavern, ACEFIELD Retro, and we are here, as you guys both said, Smoky Mountain Wrestling 1994, a pivotal year in professional wrestling. It was short-lived, but god damn it, was very memorable.
Yeah, no, absolutely insane. I'm so stoked to be going into this. Obviously, we know my love for good old Jim Cornette, damn it. And, I'm ready to roll. He's been running all over the place. He's been on our screens as much as possible this past week. I'm ripped and ready to go.
So thank you guys so much for the support for season 3, where this is going to be a shorter season, 7 episodes, and then we're going to roll into a new season. We'll announce that soon. But today we're going to be reviewing 2 months of content. So that's going to be January and February. That means 7 weeks of TV to review. And we have one premiere event. They don't call it a pay-per-view, but it is a bigger long-form event called Sunday Bloody Sunday, which took place on the day before Valentine's Day, 1994, 2/13/94. And we have freshly watched all this stuff. We have the newsletter to break down. We have all the results. And we have really what is the most amazing thing to me, a progressive mindset in 1994. We have WWF talent sharing. We're going to see a lot of the familiar faces we know from New Generation, from that side of the things. And man, this was way above its time. So Colton, when we first started talking about 1994 and we talk about talent sharing, the idea even today of a smaller, I wouldn't say independent, being able to have WWE talent come through their doors, like, what does that mean to you?
I mean, yeah, man, it's pretty unheard of. Like the level of talent share we see here is like pretty unprecedented. I mean, you see names like, we see Chris Jericho, Lance Storm. We see, you get Tatanka coming over. I mean, just guys that you should only be seeing for the big machine coming out of New York, wrestling in fucking high school gymnasiums, man. like running shows in places like Barberville, Kentucky, Knoxville, Tennessee, and the Civic Center. Like it's pretty unprecedented, man. It's been some really cool stuff to go back and watch.
Yeah, even though this was short-lived, it was something that people remember, and it ended later this year. So we're going to see kind of dip in and dip out. And there are different accounts of why the partnership ended, but also why it started. Apparently, Vince McMahon was unhappy with Smoky Mountain Wrestling's production. As we could see from watching these shows, it's not something they really put emphasis on. And the production value was not from WWF, from the Stamford, Connecticut type of thing. And Jim Cornette was reportedly difficult to work with, according to Vince McMahon.
You don't say.
They get back into bed with each other pretty quickly. But the real thing, the notable moment in wrestling history, showcasing the benefits and challenges of a cross promotion between wrestling companies. We see that today. We saw New Japan Pro Wrestling and AEW doing the Forbidden Door show, Impact also having those crossover shows as well, GCW sharing talent, and so on and so forth. But this is 1994. This was unheard of. Them crossing over, especially for a smaller independent, this might have been a direct reaction to maybe WCW. Maybe it was reacting to a relationship with New Japan Pro Wrestling and WCW. All that can be said, and helping really what was a local Tennessee independent, for lack of a better word, succeed. And we talked about Steiner Brothers. You mentioned Tatanka. We got guys like the Bushwhackers coming in. We'll also see Lex Luger. Like, there's a lot of different guys. Shawn Michaels. There's a lot of faces that we're going to see in Smoky Mountain Wrestling that a lot of people probably didn't realize.
Yeah, no, not to spoil anything, but I've going through some of the episodes. We've seen Arn Anderson pop up. Like, there's some really good stuff going on there. I love it, man. I'm so excited to see where this road takes us. It's a unmarked territory, so not a lot of people cover Smoky Mountain. The action's been fantastic. I've been loving every minute of it. So I'm looking forward to getting our toes wet here, man. It's going to be a good time.
So we're going to continue to guys, keep you up to date. And as we go on, we'll pop in some of the talent sharing. But I wanted you guys to make you aware of that, because when you see some of these names pop up, like the Body Don is being here with new gimmicks, new attire, and Smoky Mountain Wrestling, just understand that it wasn't, popping in for a cup of coffee. They were involved in storylines there. But let's get into the newsletter. Let's hop into what Dave Meltzer was saying in January of 1994.
Happy Hour.
Would y'all think we were going to change the bumpers? Come on, leave those alone. The bumpers are here to stay every season. We love Dusty Rhodes being, giving out his war cry as we get started to talk about Dave Meltzer.
I fucking love that bumper. Man.
So good. And let's start with the January 3rd, 1994 newsletter. And of course, we are saying goodbye to 1993 on the Smoky Mountain side. And they're talking about this Christmas Chaos tour that was going on 1225 in Knoxville, where they drew about 1,700 fans, with all seats being $6. Top matches saw the Bullet face Dick Murdoch in a match where Bullet put his mask up and Jim Cornette put up his hair. So this eventually, Colton, starts to be kind of controversial because we don't like false advertising. We don't like people not living up to stipulations. This was a little bit of both, because we'll talk about it throughout the show, but there is a time where they do have to unmask the Bullet. And guess what? He's wearing a mask underneath. So people were very upset about this. And false advertising was having fans that came to the arena coming to the show next month. They were leaving the show a little bit unhappy because it was, in their words, false advertising.
Well, I understand that completely, because in 1994, especially some of these rural communities, man, $6 will, buy you fucking dinner for sure. Like, that's a chump change to some of these, small town working class folks. Like, I don't know. I remember watching this back and seeing the Bullet unmasked to reveal another mask. I popped huge for that. I thought that was great. I absolutely love that. Love that gimmick. But I could definitely see, like, being a middle-aged dad in Barberville, Kentucky, being pretty fucking hot about it. Like, not seeing Jimmy Cornette get his head shaved and not seeing who the actual identity of the Bullet is. That, man, $6 a ticket for 1,700, like, that's over 10K gate right there, man. For 1994, that's some good money, especially running in these, like, high school gymnasiums and VFW and halls like they were.
Yeah. Yes. Some of the biggest things that people were referencing was that they did a loser leaves town match where no one left, and a mask, albeit career on the line versus hair, where no identity revealed and no hair was shaved. So, Mike Belcaster, on your end, you're going to a show. We talk about false advertising. We talk about the importance of stipulations, AEW living up to their end. Cody Rhodes, still to this day, never received an AEW world title shot after losing it. But what are the importance of stipulations? And do you think people have the right to be upset if they go back on them?
Yeah, it depends on the territory you're running. It depends on how often you run the territory. Obviously, here they are just in this little bubble. So, its stipulations are most important, I would assume. You got a lot of returning customers coming in to watch your shows. $6 is $6. I've done a lot of shady things for $6. So, listen, it is important, though. I don't think that the taking the mask off, having a mask underneath is too far from calling. Like, you're not really following the stipulation. They did take a mask off. So certain things, not too bad, but yeah, you should follow through with what you promised the hard paying fans, man.
So to vary things up on the other shows in this Christmas Chaos tour, they're doing Jim Cornette's hair not being at stake, but they're also putting $5,000 at stake. And those matches, Bullet pinned Murdoch. Johnson City on 12/26 drew 950 fans at $5 a piece. It also hurt because TV was strangely preempted the day before the show. We had a Barberville, Kentucky show on 12/27, also with low tickets drawing 800 fans. So I'm looking at the research, Colton. Now, first of all, I want to ask you about Barberville, Kentucky, if you had any information about it. But there is the highest height they reached attendance-wise is they drew 4,000 fans twice. And that's pretty much the range where we get from 400 fans until 4,000. There's a lot to be said about that. But Colton, I pass it your way. Barberville, Kentucky, is that near you? Is there any stories about that? Is that more rural than where you live?
It's certainly more rural than where I live, because I currently live in the biggest city in Kentucky.
Oh, that's right, Louisville. There you go.
Yeah, I'm in Louisville, but I grew up so I'm from Glasgow, Kentucky originally, which is like South Central. Glasgow's pretty small. It's been about 14,000 people for about 45 fucking years. Like, it has not grown whatsoever. They didn't even sell alcohol in my hometown until
goddamn
in the last decade. Like, my entire life, my dad drove fucking 40 minutes one way to buy beer and come back. So yeah, Barberville it's a smaller town. It is so it's way further east. It is definitely in the Appalachian Mountains, which is like pretty much all the cities that they're going to hit in Kentucky in this are going to be. It's going to be closer to that Virginia, West Virginia border, kind of running all the Appalachian towns there. So, but yeah, I mean, Barberville, I've been through it multiple times. I mean, I've driven every inch of this state at least once in my life, and especially like out east that way out towards Barberville is like absolutely beautiful country. But yeah, I mean, Barberville currently is the 2010 census had it at about 3,600 people. So,
wow.
Yeah, and that's like they don't. I mean, the most recent census I'm trying to think was what. Either way, they don't have those results yet. Put it that way. It's not that priority. So that's a 12, 13-year-old data. We're less than 4,000 people in the city of Barberville. So it's probably a solid 3.5 hours for me if I had to guess. I don't have the Google Map directions pulled up, but yeah, it's pretty rural. It's a mountain town. It's probably a coal town if I had to guess. But yeah, it's those Barberville. I think Virgie is another one that they hit quite a bit over there, also kind of in the Appalachian region. But yeah, it's different country out that way from where there's a lot of times a lot of folks out there wouldn't even consider being in Louisville. Like there's being from Kentucky and you're from Louisville to the folks out in Barberville.
Yeah. So 800 is a good number for them is what you're saying, I guess.
Oh yeah. 800 for a population. And like, there's a good chance that the population was a little higher back then because, back when coal mining was ripping and roaring, through the 80s and 90s, really in its heyday, it could have been a little bigger, but I would say 800 seems to me, especially for these towns. Like my dad talked about it a lot growing up. He would go see like wrestling at local, like, halls and stuff. I mean, it brought everybody out because, in places like this where they're so small, there's not much going on. I mean, this is big shit for them. So yeah, 800, I would say would be everybody and their mama out there.
So if we get a Venmo QR code for Colton's Venmo, maybe you guys can fund maybe him doing a tour of all the different locations, fund it for gas, a little food, pick up some snacks for the road, and he can take pictures at all these different places. That's something you guys, if you want to make it happen, you got to fund it for @mullet.mania. But we also have for January 3rd, no plans to bring in the smoking guns for the talent exchange with WWF, even though Billy Gunn and Bart Gunn would fit very, very perfectly in this environment. So maybe they'll eventually come, but right now it seems like there's no plans. All right, we go to the January 10th, 1994 newsletter. No house shows this past weekend, and most of the January house shows will be uneventful since they are only running 10 shows during the month, mainly small town stuff. The next major show will be Sunday Bloody Sunday on 2/13 in Knoxville with the Bullet versus To Be Announced in a match where either the Bullet unmasks and reveals his identity if he loses, and if it's Bob Armstrong, he's history, or if To Be Announced loses, then Bob Armstrong can return and be SMW commissioner. We also get Brian Lee versus Dirty White Boy in a chain match, Heavenly Bodies in a lights out match against Mike and Doug Furness with a football helmet on a pole. So all those things eventually wind up happening a month later. We get all these matches announced, but stipulations seem very important on their end of things, Mike Belcaster. So we're looking at, football helmet on a pole. For you watching wrestling, we're kind of used to just one-on-one matches. Do you think any of these stipulations get you through the door and make you want to watch a little bit more than you would have?
I don't know. That football helmet on a pole match really has got my attention. No, listen, the cage matches that they throw out there, there's a lot of good stuff. I'm sure in 1994, if somebody told me Cornette was going to get his hair shaved off, or else somebody's getting their mask taken off, I would muster up the $6, get my ass down to the venue and go check it out because it's entertaining stuff. But yeah, man, it's crazy to see so much gimmick on maybe a company that doesn't necessarily need it. But maybe that's what thrived a lot of the ticket sales were word of mouth of like, oh, Jim Cornette's going to get his hair shaved next week. We got to go check it out after work. I'd be down for it, man.
So also on the year-end television show that aired the past weekend, in the credits at the end of the show, they listed physician in attendance at ringside at SMW matches as Dr. Kevorkian, and the listed person in charge of SMW daycare as, I shit you not, Michael Jackson on the credits. So,
oh my God.
So someone was being very cheeky as they were doing this wrap up over here, but Dave Meltzer caught it and reported it, Colton.
That's wild, man. It's like Kevorkian, I was like, oh, pretty tongue in cheek, but listen, Michael Jackson's charge of day cars. That's a rough one, brother. That's
ahead of their times.
Yeah, right.
So we also have Jim Cornette defending the Murdoch Bullet finish on Christmas night in Knoxville in the Cornette's hair versus Bullet unmasking match, where Bullet lost after being hit with a chain and unmasked, revealing a second mask, as we talked about, rather than his identity. Jim Cornette was defending this, saying it left the fans happy because Armstrong foiled Cornette. He didn't think people would take it as being screwed. He did, however, recognize that other promotions have run fans off by ignoring advertised stipulations and emphasize Smoky Mountain Wrestling isn't going to fall in that category. It's pretty well a sure bet that 213 either a stipulation or not end with either. They're going to have a clear finish because I think Cornette kind of heard the clamoring of fans. So we'll see what happens. We got some good interviews leading up to it, but he is recognizing the fans were kind of, begrudgingly leaving the arena after that happened. And I kind of liked it. I didn't look at it as false advertising, but you could see when people are looking to find out who the hell is the guy under the mask and it's another mask. It's like, really, that's what you guys did after a month and a half of build? I don't know if it's their best thing to do.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, go ahead.
I could see that being like, being fans, think about this. This is 20 years ago, 20, 30 years ago. Like we've seen so many different things happen in wrestling as hardcore fans. Like we see that and we're like, oh man, that's great. What a great swerve. But as 1994 going to see that. Yeah, I could absolutely see being hot about that for sure. Because it's like, it's another mask that I could see that pissing me off big time back then.
Yeah, and it's not like the Sting, gimmick where he pulls the mask off and it's Sting underneath. This is we're dying to find out who's under this mask, and so I could see a few people getting hot about it.
There's some good interviews with Dick Murdoch leading up to the match he had at this 213 show, and Meltzer says they're hilarious leading up to the Bullet match. He did one at a bar drinking core, saying he'd work for Smoky Mountain Wrestling, which he kept calling it Rocky Mountain Wrestling because they are an honest on the up and up promotion, unlike the rest of the wrestling promotions that are under all federal indictment. The other one, you guys can find it on YouTube, is an interview sitting out in front of his house in the snow without a shirt on. So Dick Murdoch, sneaky personality. I don't think people really give him credit for like kind of the promo chops that he had going on here. Funny as hell. I mean, he just couldn't get the promotion right. Kept calling it Rocky Mountain Wrestling, which is kind of an awesome name too. But Smoky Mountain is what was here to stay.
That's great.
little bit of a geographical difference there between the Rocky and the Smoky Mountains.
This is why we have you on here, Colton, to hold us fucking accountable on our side, making sure the New Yorker and the Chicago don't get that shit wrong. Appalachian and Rocky are two different things.
Oh, big time, man. Yeah, Rocky Mountains are running through it. I mean, Smoky Mountains are kind of they're their own range, even from the Appalachian Mountains. Rocky Mountains are running through Colorado, brother. We're in a way different time zone. So, but that's hilarious that old Captain Redneck Dick Murdoch was. I gotta hope part of that was intentional.
Yeah.
On the January 17th, 1994 newsletter, Meltzer talks about Smoky Mountain having a date booked at the Cobb County Civic Center in Marietta, Georgia on 3/10, which Meltzer says, my gut feeling will be pushed as a major show. And he says SMW is on a small Channel 14 station in Atlanta, and Cornette and Candido have been doing localized interviews making fun of WCW since the show started. He continues, Cornette keeps referring to WCW drawing 700 fans to the Omni, and Candido mentioned things like, quote, midget blowing up boat matches. So there'll be a couple times that they are really drawing the ire of WCW. There's a jobber that they have. They're making it seem like it's Jim Herd from Jim Crockett Promotions. So there's a lot of beef with WCW and Jim Cornette. And I think it's exactly why Vince McMahon is willing to be the talent sharing. I think he recognized, you know what? Fuck WCW. We hate him. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. So at this point, I think that's probably why. I think we unlocked the key to Vince McMahon's thought process is like, why not? Maybe because if they hate WCW enough, maybe they'll put a damage in the hull of the boat.
Yeah, man, you could make a hell of a drinking game out of shots taken at WCW by Jim Cornette by going back and watching this, because it's multiple times an episode. Many times he'll take a jab saying, oh, we're pulling in talent from WCW. What little they have. It's like sometimes they're subtle, sometimes they're not so subtle.
Yeah, nobody's got more tongue in cheek than Cornette. I mean, and that just makes it even more fun to watch.
There's some really good, funny, like you have to like be listening carefully when you're watching these episodes, because there's Harry White of St. Louis is being used as a heel member of the board of directors. And the storyline is that White got the Bruise Brothers suspended for 6 weeks, and that White can't be reached because he's on a Caribbean cruise paid by Cornette's mother. So like these like nuanced things, you could just hear it in Jim Cornette's voice of pitching it somewhere that this is the very specific thing. If you guys listen to the Jim Cornette Experience or any of his podcasts or shoot interviews, that's how his mind works. He wants to make sure everything makes sense and is concise. And I think that's also why people really relate to him in a time where wrestling feels like it's give you the hits, give you the hits, give you the hits. It's more with him. It's slow burn storytelling that's supposed to make sense. And maybe that's what was the demise of Smoky Mountain Wrestling. They didn't have any of those big hits, but what they did do is have cohesive, relevant stories that made sense. And I think that's what we're pulling from here.
Yeah.
Yeah, most definitely. And Corny's, he's a Louisville native himself. It's actually still lives in Louisville to this day. I've met him one time at a meet and greet for Ohio Valley Wrestling's 1000th show, and yeah, he's, from what I can tell, he's 100% the guy. It's none of it is an act. He's exactly the guy we hear on his podcast and see on TV.
Yeah, 100%. That's why I'm drinking my Sprite, keeping the feeling going, ordering some Wendy's later. Like, we're really getting in on it.
Double meat, double cheese, extra mayo.
Extra mayo.
Goddamn.
So January 24th newsletter. This group is organizing 2 fan tours for newsletter readers in particular. The first is what they're calling Golden Week on 310 to 319, which will consist of 8 shows, include the 310 Marietta, Georgia show, which will be the biggest show in terms of talent expenses in the promotion's history. They also have Fan Week will take place from 8/5 to 8/13, and then Meltzer gives the info about how to find this. But they're trying to tap into the smart fans, and I think that's how, similar to 1995 ECW, Mike, when we're talking about that and talking about the fans that were doing these fan meetups, and they're trying to find a way to have this booster club type of thing in a time where the world was a lot bigger. You couldn't connect with people in the same way. Yeah. But this was a way to connect fans of like-minded with the fan tours and having this Golden Week dedicated to fans, kind of ahead of its time.
Way ahead of its time, and super it's a smart business plan to do for a small promotion. I feel like that's why people remember Smoky Mountain so fondly, is because they had this fan interaction that was way ahead of its time. I mean, you got to send a letter to a post office or a PO box, man, just to get information about it. It's insane, but it does the trick. I mean, it worked with ECW, with the fans were talking about it all over the world, and I feel like this is maybe the first stepping stone in that general direction. It's a brilliant move, man.
I think if we get to the bottom of the feeling of why people like SMW so much, and we got requests to do this, and there's a lot of fandom, and it was short-lived. It wasn't a long existence, and I think last year around this time, AEW passed the length of time that they were in existence. They surpassed them, but for whatever reason, whether it be Jim Cornette's large personality or the characters that had here, and just the feeling of, because I feel like watching these shows, it's like a warm, cuddly blanket. There's something nostalgic about it, even if you didn't live through that time. I don't know if you guys have that same feeling, but it feels very comfortable. And I there's no other word for it, that it feels like a nice big sweatshirt on a really cold winter's day.
Absolutely. It's got that vibe of like how ECW was for us, and even a little bit of WCW and WWF, but I mean, the throwback, the grittiness of the production, the dark lights around the ring, you got Rock and Roll Express on your screen. I don't know what more you could ask for as a wrestling fan going back in time. This is beautiful.
So we also have Terry Funk being at will be the TBA and the 213 Knoxville show against the Bullet. We don't know the stipulations outside of if the Bullet wins, Bob Armstrong gets to be commissioner of SMW once again. But if he loses, he has to unmask, will be suspended, and must crawl across the ring on his belly to kiss Jim Cornette's feet. So they're building this up. This is a big deal. Terry Funk going to be in the house. Also, shout out to Terry Funk, his birthday last week. One of the best to ever do it. So Terry Funk being involved in SMW was a pleasant surprise. Very excited to see that.
Yeah, I mean, a big name for them to get, and I really love the setup for this match too, is because it's a Texas death match, which Bob Armstrong has never beaten Terry Funk in his career up to this point, and Terry Funk's never lost a Texas death match, so it really stacks the deck against the Bullet here, or AKA Bob Armstrong, who no one's really sure, but Jimmy is pretty convinced that it's definitely Bob Armstrong, or either way, it's somebody fighting in his favor. But yeah, talking about this, kind of feeling like a warm fuzzy blanket, man. I mean, it is, it's quintessential like Southern Territory wrestling, and it very much like, and I think, going back and watching it, we were talking off air, it can be kind of a lot to follow, because they, on the TV side of it, there's a lot of like recaps and stuff of, stuff they're showing, things that have happened previous weeks like that. And it can kind of feel a little disjointed, a little hard to follow, but it's definitely a show that is geared towards the in-person audience. And I think that's something that like really kind of sets it apart, and why people remember it so fondly is because, they weren't there on TNT trying to sell commercial ad space. Like, they were there doing the stories the way they like them, for the fans, for the people that are showing up in these small towns for these shows. And just go back, watch any of these episodes from 94, 93, any of it prior to this year too. Like, you're going to see some of the best promo work you've ever seen in your life.
It's a very good point, and I think that's a really well said. I think also that we can kind of, who would have thought we could tie it with ECW 1995, but that's a part of I think we're onto something, tying in the relationship and the interaction with the fans and making them feel like they're a part of a movement that's different than what's being part of the mainstream. And I think that's also what Smoky Mountain did in 1994. Think about what's going on their side. It's WrestleMania 10. It's things like that. Doink the Clown. It's Crush. It's all that stuff on WWF side. It's making people kind of yearn for the old school wrestling, as you said. And on Wikipedia, if you look at Smoky Mountain's Wikipedia site, it says genre. It says literally wrestling. So it is what it is. And I think people really gravitate towards it because in a lot of ways, and we're talking about this on Wrestling Tonight, which dropped earlier in the week, there is something that Chris Hero said about the 4 different types of wrestling. I'm not sure if you guys saw, compare Lucha Libre, British Strong Style, New Japan Pro Wrestling type of strong style wrestling, and also American wrestling. American wrestling at the core, what it is morality, good versus evil. And I think that's what we see here. It's very black and white of who's the good guy, who's the bad guy. No nuance of get everybody to cheer the bad guy. It's just suspend belief, have the good guy go over. And at the end of the day, everyone leaves happy unless, they reveal a mask under a mask. But yeah, I mean, the other thing is Cornette continues. You mentioned it before, Colton, but Cornette delivered knocks on WCW in an interview saying he's scouring the talent list of every major federation. And he's even looking at WCW, as you mentioned, at what little talent they have left. But said that Terry Funk was the one wrestler that Bob Armstrong never pinned during his career. So Bob Armstrong, we covered him a little bit in 1996 WCW, underrated talent. Very, very strong in the ring. And, I know the Chads always kind of speak very highly of him. Bob Armstrong, one of those guys, if you grew up watching old school WCW, you were very familiar with his work. Good hand, one of those guys, reliable. I'm very excited to see him get pretty much the emphasis on Smoky Mountain Wrestling. He's a big force of what's in here. And I guess we get to see the meat of what made him so popular among Southern fans.
Yeah, it's I'm all about it, man. I watched a lot of WCW during the Monday Night Wars era, but as far as like some of the classic prior to that, like I don't have as much experience with. So I'm excited to see some more Bob Armstrong as we continue to work through Smoky Mountain.
So for the last of January 31st, 1994, we have the first emergence of Lance Storm and Chris Jericho being announced here that they're coming to SMW. And Meltzer says both well done on the tag team formerly known as Sudden Impact in Western Canada, we now know as Lance Storm, and Chris Corazon de Leon Jericho are expected to be headed in immigration work is being done on the latter team. And man, Chris Jericho, Lance Storm, we could spend all day talking about the influence that these guys have. And Lance Storm, one of my favorite workers in the history of wrestling. Chris Jericho is a Mount Rushmore type of guy. To have 2 of their guys in the States getting their start here is a really goddamn big deal. And some of the work they do as a tag team, awesome stuff. The promo is maybe a little bit corny, but it fits what the aesthetic is of Smoky Mountain. I'm really looking forward to getting into their body of work here. And honestly, one of the reasons why I felt comfortable picking this season is like getting to tap into them and being familiar with them is like almost a gateway bridge into understanding the rest of how the roster works.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm so excited to see their beautiful debuts in the Americans. They obviously, Lance Storm is just above his time. So is Chris Jericho. But this is truly, I mean, these guys were so innovative, so damn good on the mic, in the ring, doing the promos. It's just an unstoppable force to bring into any company. Super pumped for it.
So for the dates listed for Golden Week is actually right now a situation where SMW is going to promote a full schedule of house shows during the week with several major shows during that period, but not just a fan convention, just that SMW wanted to alert out-of-town fans that it's a good time to come in. They're going to be sponsoring a fan week in early August, setting up hotels, trains for matches, and meetings with wrestlers for those who want to come out of town. Sound familiar? That sounds like StarCast, dude. Like happened in 1994. For Smoky Mountain Wrestling. This is kind of the skeleton of what would be StarCast and what it becomes every wrestling convention or just local hotspot indie show outside of SummerSlam, WrestleMania, the big shows that happen in the areas. This is kind of the formula that they're using nowadays with the autograph signings, getting out of towners, having blocks of hotels. Again, very progressive.
Very. I like it.
Any thoughts on that, Colton?
I mean, I can't say that, what better playbook to draw from for something like StarCast than this right here, man. Sure. I mean, you think about this as a time before social media or this is before fucking most people had wireless phones at this point. You gotta find some way to get these people out to shows, man. And they did a great job of it.
So the other thing I mentioned before, where he had a local enhancement talent working under the name Jason Hurd, the Moondogs destroyed him and they're advertising him as the son of Jim Herd. So again, another shot at WCW. We're gonna, if we were doing a drinking game, as you mentioned before, I think that would be the drinking game to play, because man, they take any shot they can at WCW and Jim Crockett Promotions, because it sounds like Jim Cornette absolutely despises them. So why not?
Yeah, you gotta strike while the iron's hot, man.
Going to the February 7th, 1994 newsletter. On TV that aired this weekend, Terry Funk did an interview with Dory and announced that Dory was coming to Knoxville for 213, the match against Bob Armstrong. So we're going to get a little bit of Dory Funk coming in with Terry Funk. We talked about Dory Funk at length during 1998 on the kind of enhancement of the roster doing those local training camps, but nice to see him being involved. Another guy that doesn't really get his recognition amongst active competitors. People really see the name Dory Funk. They think about his contributions outside of the ring, but his in the ring stuff is just as impressive.
Yeah, no, I'm super happy to hear him not necessarily getting his flowers, but getting his feet wet and doing the dirty work, training these kids, seeing who he's built up. I mean, we just did 1998 WWF, and basically any newcomer that was coming up from it was at a training seminar through Dory Funk. So, I mean, he did wonders, man. He just was spreading out talent like butter on bread, man.
Moving through for Chris Jericho and Lance Storm, they're mentioned again here in the newsletter on February 7th. Meltzer says they'll be in town this week having music videos done on them, and they won't be wrestling yet since Jericho has a WAR tour that ends on 3/2, and all the paperwork when it comes to work permits hasn't completed on Jericho. So he's just allowed to be there, not allowed to be active in the ring. They used the team in Canada and Japan as Sudden Impact, but they will probably be given a different name and gimmick, as Cornette believes he has an idea that will rocket them into Memphis Fabs-like popularity. The two headlined on 128 in Calgary on the local promotions card, and most falls within 30 minutes. Storm won 4-3, and that was said to have been the best match in Calgary in a long, long time. So making names already, and Jim Cornette, eye of talent, identified that both these guys are going to be future stars. Both eventually make it to the biggest stage you can make it on. Chris Jericho reaches higher heights, but let's not dismiss what Lance Storm was able to achieve in WWF as well. Former IC champion, tag team champion. He is a producer on Impact side now. This dude is still giving back to the business, and both these guys, every step of the way, whether it be Smoky Mountain, whether it be ECW, WCW, WWF, WWE, these guys continue to kind of grow. And again, inside into Jim Cornette's mind, he saw something in them all the way back in 1994.
Yeah, man, this early on, it's pretty cool that you can, that he sees this much in these guys, just seeing what they've done like in Western Canada. I mean, like the way you lay it out, Ace, with them like making music videos for these guys and everything, like they're really like for a promotion of this size and like this level, like they're really rolling out the red carpet and pulling out all the stops to get these guys like geared up to be on TV, which I think is really cool. I mean, there's no way that there's really no way to tell. It seems like when you read all that, just going off, these guys this early in their career, you're kind of really taking kind of a shot on them. But I mean, it obviously paid off. I mean, look at them. I mean, two of the greatest names in the business.
Yeah, the thing for February 14th, 1994, we finally see some of the names pop in. It will become clear about how many WF talent are going to be coming in. Of course, we know Well Done being debuted as a heel team, coming in and crushing everybody, thinking they're better than everybody. But we have the complete lineup for 310 in Marietta, Georgia. We have Bobby Blaze versus 1-3 Kid, Hillbilly Festus versus New Jack, Ronnie Garvin versus Kevin Sullivan. We get Smothers versus Candido in a ladder match. We get Lex Luger versus IRS, Brian and Scott versus Steve Armstrong versus Well Done and Jeff Jarrett. We got the Bodies versus Rock and Roll. Guys that caught my mind here is IRS, Lex Luger, 1-2-3 Kid popping in here for a March show. And we're going to get to cover it next, episode 2 of season 4. Interesting to see. And the talent share, I mean, this is a super show. We mentioned the fans coming in out of town and building this fan friendly thing. It's a big deal again to see 1-2-3 Kid, who fresh off of that win that he had in, against Razor Ramon, not too long again from that point, but Lex Luger too, IRS, these are big names coming in.
Yeah, it's insane. This is a stacked card. And this is worth $6. Absolutely. Sign me up, man. I'll skip dinner tonight.
Dude, we have some other names of cities on the 21st, and there's not much to talk about as far as just the newsletter, but we have other cities, Colton. I want you to give you perspective on them. Harlan, Kentucky. We got West Liberty, Kentucky. And I guess if you had to give people that are not familiar with it, what is the kind of lay of the land of running shows there? Is that more of closer to bigger city, or is that still same energy as that we have with the other areas? That's very, very small town.
So Harlan is going to be, Harlan is like 3.5 hours, like pretty much straight southeast of Louisville. And Harlan is a little bit bigger of a town than Barberville. It's definitely, it's a county seat. But I mean, it's still very rural. Like, I mean, Harlan is very much like the biggest town there for, multiple counties around. Like I've been in a wedding in Harlan one time many years ago, and when I was at a wedding in Harlan, it was a Baptist wedding that had no alcohol at the reception, and it was in the reception was like breakfast buffet because it was so early in the day. But it's also it's beautiful country out there, man. And then West Liberty is also extremely small town. Of the three that we've mentioned, Harlan's definitely going to be the biggest. But yeah, all kind of in that southeastern area, not too far. I know earlier we were talking about Barberville. That's like it's pretty much directly due north of Knoxville. So like these are all places, not too far for them to make, like, because obviously they're, running right out of Tennessee there. So towns that are not difficult to make, just running straight up the highway.
Love it. And the geographical stuff is appreciated. And I think it's also good to understand just the landscape of who they're booking towards. And these types of fans that are not exposed to, don't have the availability of getting to any of these other bigger shows. That's why I think the passion that they felt from, Jim Cornette to bring in this talent to them. It felt like he was doing shows for them. And then that's also part of the family environment we have going on here. I think that's also has to be said, that people felt like, again, they were part of something bigger than them. And then this is a kind of us versus them mentality of SMW versus the bigger fish in the pond, or whatever you want to say it as. But yeah, they felt very, very attached to the talent that are here locally. And I think they also felt a sense of gratitude that they had access to shows like this, and all these local towns that were, it wouldn't be easy for them to get to a bigger WCW show that's happening in maybe Louisville or something like that. But very, very big idea here, and I liked it. But February 24th, 1994, we had the SMW Championships tag titles on the line multiple times outside of the territory, and they changed hands. In Port Huron, Michigan, the Rock and Roll Express regained the tag titles from the Heavenly Bodies, but the title switched back on 219 in Taylor, Michigan. So they're bouncing around with the titles, and they're also helping build up their show outside of the promotion. I'm not exactly sure what promotion they were working, but they're setting up a 60-minute match to set up marathon matches, which is most falls in 60 minutes between the two teams for the title, which Meltzer says will be even more arduous than it sounds because Morton has been working on a badly injured ankle. We're so used to the Iron Man match, and that feels like a very big piece of I guess WWE lore of, for lack of a better word. AEW, of course, had the MJF and Bryan Danielson one. Marathon match has a little bit, especially a tag match, the emphasis on tag team wrestling to give them a spotlight for 60 minutes to go out there. And people were captivated by the idea. Interesting and different, I guess, ability to pay attention for the fans that were watching SMW during this time.
Yeah, I'm surprised we haven't seen it like redone, like with the Bucks and FTR. Like, it sounds like such a great concept. I would love to see an Iron Man, tag match. It would be so badass, especially with the landscape of all the amazing teams that are out there today. I mean, could you imagine Lucha Brothers versus, pick any team that you possibly want and make it happen? That's brilliant, man. I'd be down.
Yeah, I wouldn't put it past, especially with, Dax and Cash stepping up and having a little bit bigger of a role and creative with the formation of Collision. I wouldn't put it past to have a 60-minute tag match, maybe go up against Bullet Club Gold not too far in the future.
That'd be awesome. We know the influence that SMW has on fans like Dax. He references Jim Cornette and holds him in high esteem. But I think a lot of that, the emphasis on tag wrestling is huge here. The biggest stars in the territory, a lot of the time, are Rock and Roll Express. They're two guys that people look at as equivalent to the world champion. And I don't think we have that in any promotion right now, that we feel that the tag titles are on the same level. Maybe eventually we'll get back to that point, but as of right now, no. But this is a different emphasis on tag team wrestling that's happening in Smoky Mountain that isn't anywhere else.
And just to redirect for just a second, I just wouldn't feel like a proper Kentuckian if I didn't correct myself on this. Barberville is bigger than Harlan. I had that backwards. Barberville's got more people. That's like I said, but just to illustrate it here, they're all Barberville, Liberty, and Harlan are all probably within an hour and a half of each other. Barberville running about 3,500 people, Harlan about 1,500, and I think Liberty coming in even smaller than that. So just to put it in perspective, these 800, 700 person houses is about half the fucking town.
But, so if you guys, again, we'll put a Venmo code up there on our Instagram. If you want to fund Colton quitting his day job and go town to town and take pictures in front of all these places and have social media presence, you can break into any of these high schools in Jefferson, anywhere like that. That would be fantastic if you can make that happen for us.
So, hey, man, I mean, I can do it. That's the thing. So when I was in college, I took about a week and drove a circle around the state and camped in a bunch of like different state parks and visited other places. Like if I really committed to it and didn't have to work, got some good funds from the fans. Like we could do this in about, I could probably hit all these towns in a few days time.
Hell yeah. With that said, let's get our fix. Let's talk about the 7 weeks of TV plus Sunday Bloody Sunday event. We have a lot to break down, the match, the results, and all the storyline progression as we first get our fix here in 1994.
Get your fix.
All right, let's set the stage. Smoky Mountain Wrestling TV, our first show that we're covering here. We're not going to cover the one from the first of the year because it's a recap show. They talk about everything that happened in 1993. They cover the year at large. If you want to check it out, but it's just recapping that year. But we're here covering 1994, and the first episode that progresses storylines here in this year is from 1/8/1994 from Jefferson, North Carolina. We have 4 matches on the docket, a lot of angles to break down. Tell you guys the match is quick. Rock and Roll Express defeated the Hornet and Mike Collins. The tag team champions, the Heavenly Bodies, defeated Chris Kanyon and Rock Regal, who we'll talk about in 1 second. Dirty White Boy fought SMW heavyweight champion Brian Lee to a no contest. And we also had Chris Candido defeating the TV champion Tracy Smothers to win the title. So initial reactions, we'll talk about the angles and break down everything that went down in that. But I guess, Colton, initial reactions to your first exposure to this product as we were watching this. There's a YouTube playlist. Please don't take it down, anyone. It's our lifeblood right now of checking out the TV with the actual music. They don't have any music dubbed over, so we have all the licensed music or non-licensed music, however you want to put it. Get to enjoy it here. But for their first episode, 4 matches, a lot of good stuff in this 49 minutes and change that we had to watch. But initial reactions, Colton.
Dude, initial reactions is, I mean, seeing Chris Candido here was pretty cool. I thought, I was like, man, looking back now, like this is, a pretty big get for them. But I loved the promo work between, like both the promos from the Wild-Eyed Southern Boy, Tracy Smothers, and Chris Candido kind of going at each other. Like this is like just primo, like any young wrestler coming up today. We were talking to the group chat, people were dragging Jungle Boy through the mud on his promo work, and it's like, name anybody that's just totally incredible. There's plenty of people that are passable, but name anybody today that's just incredible. And you go back and watch any of the promos from this first episode of 1994, and they're all better than anybody doing it today. And that was like the first thing kind of stuck out to me. This is where we get to see the Bullet. They review the Bullet unmasking gimmick, which we've talked at length at so far. I absolutely loved that. We get to see the Moondogs and our video of the Moondogs and the Bruise Brothers, which I know we'll get to later. Just the Moondogs really caught my eye, man. These are guys that I was not familiar with. I did a little researching on the internet with them, and heard that they were known. So first of all, there's been a huge amount of Moondog brothers. There's like probably all together, unofficial and official, like 14 different guys that have been Moondogs.
A litter,
over the
if
years.
you will. A litter
of moon pups. But what I found as a description is that they were known in wrestling in frayed blue jeans, sporting shaggy blonde hair and beards, and carrying animal bones around with them, which they chewed on and both used as weapons. Like, it doesn't get much more wrestling than that, dude. These are fucking hill people. This is the definition of like you've ever seen the movie Deliverance. Like these are not the people you want to fucking run into in the woods as an out of towner.
The hills have eyes type of energy. But we talked about the interviews that happened here, and we open up an interview with Tracy Smothers and Sandy Scott interviewed with the fans saying they deserve a rematch between Smothers and Chris Candido this week. Smothers wants to prove he can beat Candido if he gets that chance tonight. one thing I pulled away from watching Chris Candido work, first of all, gone too soon. The dude was absolutely great. I'm very familiar with his ECW work, not as familiar with his SMW work. The other thing and I know I'm not sure if you guys pulled away from this, I think MJF is a carbon copy of this dude. Like everything he does in the ring is very, very similar to MJF, or I mean, obviously MJF similar to Chris Candido. Some of his signature moves as well are very from the Chris Candido playbook. It was like watching MJF incarnate. I was like, this is insane to me. So you could tell his influence. And he did post that thing a while ago when everyone was making light of the Adam Cole promo when he's talking about his influences. And Chris Candido was on that list of people that he references, and same body type. Even his attire is very similar as well, man. Chris Candido, I'm very excited to see for the rest of this year what he's able to do. Glad he captured the TV championship. And what was a good match. I mean, we're not really going to talk about a lot of work rate here in 1994, but as far as this goes and a beat the champ TV champion, I like that concept too. Like it's boom, boom. It's a sprint. And you know that, you're going to get a finish in this no matter what.
Yeah, and that's awesome, man. I thought the exact same thing. I mean, you can really see it, and also just kind of like in his, it's not a carbon copy, but just like in his candor and like the pattern of his speech and his delivery and his promos, you can definitely see where MJF drew a lot of inspiration from Candido, and like very similar size of guys. But talking about, this is not exactly known for work rate. I thought the match between Smothers and Candido was some of the best that we saw on this show for sure. Like those guys can both definitely go. I mean, Smothers got to do a little bit more in WWF after this was after Smoky Mountain was said and done. I mean, that guy was also, I think, pretty underappreciated in his time. But it's good shit.
Yeah, we were talking about it on the Impact show. You were saying he's dripped out in the Confederate flag, which we're not going to be able to see ever again, but this is a point of pride. You got to put this in a time capsule for everybody, that it's not, a lot of people probably wouldn't be able to show this on a compilation package on any network TV show anymore, but this is the time and place. This is what we're dealing with here. And I think similar to like Dukes of Hazzard, that type of stuff, it lives in a vacuum of what it was. So it is a little bit jarring. You and I were discussing it on Impact. That's a little jarring to see at first, but Tracy Smothers, that makes him a baby face in this area.
Oh, 100%, man. I mean, and I can say, like, growing up around, like, I mean, you'll see the Confederate flag anywhere. I've seen the Confederate flag in fucking upstate New York, man. I'm sure, like, and when you see it up that way, it's definitely a little bit more of like, oh man, these people are definitely leaning on more of the neo-Nazi camp instead of the Dukes of Hazzard, Leonard Skinner fan camp, but it's like you said, it's a different time. This is, I full on believe that Tracy Smothers was wearing that. It makes you a babyface in this era in the South, and didn't at this point. Tracy Smothers is not out here pushing some racist agenda. He's out here pushing Southern pride, man, and just the fact that he's a wild-eyed Southern boy, and he's says please and thank you and works hard and fucking eats his vegetables and but also knows how to have a good time. So
he's the Southern Popeye. It's all good.
But Belcaster, going back to the Chris Candido point before we move too far away from it with the MJF stuff, do you feel that connection as well with MJF? Do you feel like you see a lot of the similarities?
100%. Like cadence, very, very like he not copy and paste, but MJF kind of evolved it, and make it more dastardly, make it more his own unique thing. But I mean, Candido is definitely the starting foundation of MJF making his creative wrestler,
Yeah. 100%. We also have this Rock and Roll Express being interviewed following their victory against, earlier in the night with the Hornet and Mike Collins. And Morton mentions what happened at Survivor Series when they lost the belts. They thought the match was over when Pritchard tossed Morton over the top rope. Apparently, Morton is confident they will be champs for the 6th time. So they did this at Survivor Series 1993, where Rock and Roll Express was there, and the fans didn't really react to him. It didn't have the same reverence as we probably thought that they would have. But when he went over the top rope, apparently at the time, he thought when he went over the top rope, the match was a disqualification. So that's why they were saying they lost. It kind of kept kayfabe that they were strong, that even though they took a loss at Survivor Series, they were able to come back and say, like, we just didn't know the rules. Like we didn't know the rules in the Eastern area of the wrestling promotion. So kind of cool to hear him mention Survivor Series and talk about their time there. And a lot of people probably forget, of course, Rock and Roll has been a WCW 96. We saw him, but to think about them in 1993 in WWF for a short period of time, it's kind of mind blowing a little bit.
Yeah, it is, man. I had that note. Like, I thought this was wild that they mentioned WWF Survivor Series by name, and like we're allowed to, like that, just obviously shows like at this point how open that door was between Cornette and Vince. Was that I mean usually you couldn't have. I mean, you see subtle, jabs and references to WWE between AEW and WWE these days, but like nobody says WrestleMania on TBS or TNT. They're going to get their ass fined. It's a trademark name. Like I thought that was pretty wild that they not only said it by name, but like actually did they show footage of it?
I don't believe they showed it, but maybe it was edited out of the YouTube thing because it was not on the YouTube. But it's very possible they showed it because again, they still have the music. They have old time rock and roll. Like it doesn't matter. Like it doesn't like they don't have any of the licensing issues. And 1994 is a different time and era because this was living locally on local TV in Tennessee and other areas of the like. So it never would have gotten to, I guess, WWF's radar if there was an issue. And I think that was probably the mindset they had.
Shout out to Rock and Roll Express for not only being on, I think, every season of Shot of Nostalgia, but I mean, they've been on every fucking company like that you could possibly. I mean, we see them in AEW.
Still working, bro.
They're still working, man. That's insane. But listen, this was so cool. I'm a big Rock and Roll Express mark. I was so happy to see. Like this is them in their prime, man. I love this. Sure. And Ricky Morton looks, 5 years older than he does now here, which is even crazier.
Oh man, but we also see footage of that Bullet and Dick Murdoch thing that we're talking about, the Christmas Chaos event. Bullet doesn't sell a tennis racket shot and he hits Murdoch in the face. Murdoch decks Bullet with brass knuckles, and that means Bullet would have to unmask. We get Dick and Jim sitting in chairs waiting to see Bullet unmask and let this kind of unfold here. The referee helps Bullet and another mask is underneath. The fans react the way they would react. Bullet has an unmask after chopping the heels, and we see more footage from another match between the two, and Bullet pins Murdoch after tossing Cornette off the top. So they're really putting emphasis, and that's part of similar to what we covered in ECW, where these compilation shows where they have to fit so much in the time to get people caught up to the storylines. It's not just about the matches. They're not making assumptions that the product. They want to make sure things that happened in the past, things that were memorable, things that are coming up in the future. And that's what you can really kind of break this down and only watch 15, 20 minutes of the show and get everything you need, especially if you're watching week to week. But they make sure that they kind of assume everyone's watching for the first time. And that's appreciated because that brings fans together and it actually makes them understand. And, that's a conversation for another time where maybe some wrestling fans feel like AEW just assumes everything. This is the exact opposite approach on SMW's end, where they're just like, wow, like they're really breaking it down in bite-sized pieces so you understand the history with Bullet and Dick Murdoch and the history of Jim Cornette and the history of Rock and Roll Express, and they beat into your head into submission, which I think is important.
Yeah.
Well, at this point in time, they have to, because it's not like today where like we can miss a show and then just catch up on the clips on our phone while we're taking a shit. You gotta, if you missed it, you're not going to see it again until they get their slot the next week. So yeah, I think they do a good job of that.
So we also have the SMW Tag Team Champions, the Heavenly Bodies, and Jim Cornette being interviewed. And this is a classic interview with Jim Cornette, kind of copy and paste from every Jim Cornette interview you've ever seen. And he runs down the list of teams that haven't gotten the job done against the Bodies. And he runs down the whole roster. Cornette embarrassed the Rock and Roll Express worldwide. He said Pritchard believes they have made their reputation following their win at Survivor Series. And Cornette said they were going to take them out of Smoky Mountain Wrestling. Jim Cornette as a mouthpiece is just, I mean, he took it. You can watch him in any promotion he's been in. You can go back to his time with Vader. You talk about his time in 1998. Whenever you give this dude a mic, it's just like he could. What would you say the other day? He could sell ketchup pop to the girl wearing white gloves. That's what you said. Yeah. That's exactly what it is.
He could sell ketchup popsicle to a girl wearing white gloves.
And that's what it is, dude. Like I feel like he could sell us anything, and that's what, like, you all of a sudden care so much about the Heavenly Bodies and the Rock and Roll Express. I'm invested just by this 2.5 minute promo, and that speaks a lot about what he's able to do here.
Yeah, no, it's awesome, and this is like the heart and soul, of Smoky Mountain. I could watch Cornette, just he could read fucking nursery rhymes for 8 hours, and I'd be like, I'm sold, man. Like, so where do I pay my $6? So awesome stuff.
So we have more segments and stuff. They show more of the Christmas Chaos stuff, seeing clips of the Bruise Brothers and Colton's favorite tag team, the Moondogs. But we also have that match in the main event for the TV championship with Smothers and Candido. We go spot by spot with some of the stuff here. It was a quick match, and of course the TV titles, that is the emphasis, the beat the champ TV challenge that they have going on here. I really like this concept. It is a TV championship at heart, at the core of it. There's nothing more to it. It doesn't really have a chance to have a match that kind of extends past a certain time limit, of course, But I thought in the time they gave it, and the time they gave to present Candido as a strong contender, it shows that he is someone that is going to be someone they build around. Even Smothers going down the card into the upper mid card fits as well. It seems like it's interchangeable. And I really much enjoyed this. It was like kind of a breath of fresh air. So I was like, when are we going to get some wrestling? And here it was with Candido and Smothers.
Yeah, this is obviously the best work that we saw, like in ring work that we saw on the card. And this is a mullet versus mullet match, man, between Smothers and Candido. I mean, Candido's got a little baby mullet compared to that waterfall that Tracy Smothers is rolling. But yeah, man, this is good. And obviously, like, this is not they're going to pair these guys together, multiple other times going through the month. So it's not a match I get sick of seeing by any means.
So the other thing they're going to be really enhancing is the White Boy and the Brian Lee feud for the SFW championship. In a lot of ways, it feels secondary to the tag titles. It really does, but that's for the world title. And they're building this up. They're building it towards a direction where the feud's going to be at a point where it's a huge blow up. There was a segment that just angle advancement on the show, but we're going to get that payoff very, very soon in the next couple of weeks that we're going to be covering on this episode here. But that's maybe the biggest complaint I have about it is that the world title feels not as important. I don't know if you guys have the same feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think part of that is just going to be name recognition alone. I mean, like the Rock and Roll Express. I mean, Dirty White Boy and Brian Lee, like both good hands, but like definitely much more like regional guys that, like the Mamaws who are coming to these shows are going to recognize those guys, but fucking everybody's going to recognize, Gibson and Morton, and also the Heavenly Bodies too. Like at this point, it's just, you gotta push especially if you're doing anything for TV, obviously you got to highlight and push your bigger names. And I'm sure they're just going off name recognition alone, but it is kind of odd to see the tag titles, take the place of a world title. Kind of goes back to that argument we had about who's headlining WrestleMania this year or that night. Is it going to be the tag titles or is it going to be the women's champion?
Yeah.
So yeah, kind of a weird feel, but I get it with, you don't get much bigger than the Rock and Roll Express.
So going to the Smoky Mountain Wrestling TV on 1/15/1994 from Chowhowie, Virginia, from a high school, dude. Attendance 350. So anyone in the Virginia area, this is a local high school. House some TV tapings here for Smoky Mountain Wrestling, but we had 4 matches on deck, including tag titles on the line and the world title. Opening match was Tracy Smothers defeating Jeff Victory. The TV title on the line was Chris Candido defending against Ricky Morton, and he defended it successfully. The tag titles on the line, the Heavenly Bodies defeated Jason Hurd and Jason West in pretty much a squash match. And the world title on the line, Brian Lee defeated Bobby Blaze. So we got 3 championship matches out of 4 matches. Well, of course, we'll talk about some of the angles and the interviews that go in, but I guess this felt more of the Smoky Mountain type of feeling that we had in a high school, not much lighting and production. Because this is what Vince probably popped in. Like, what are we even associated with? But here we are, Chowhowie High School. Thoughts on this?
Man, one of my favorite takeaways from this is the fact that the Beat the Champ match that we're having every week, the way that we're getting the opponent is Dirty Dutch Mantell's pulling the fucking name out of a ball cap. I absolutely love that, man. I think that's awesome. And I mean, it's pretty, them doing it from a high school, I just think speaks to, I mean, that's what's available where they're at. It's not that they couldn't book a bigger venue. It's that's the venue in these rural areas, man. Is like the high school is going to seat the most people. That's where you gotta take it to the folks. So yeah, I could definitely see that being something where Vince and the New York boys are like, what the fuck, man? We're running high school houses around here, like high school gymnasiums. But that's a lot of, for a $6 ticket, getting to see 3 championship matches is a big deal, man. It's a good way to draw folks in.
Yeah, hell of a card for only 350 people in attendance. That's insane.
But I mean that for a high school gymnasium in the middle of nowhere, Virginia, man. I mean 350. That's a good crowd. I mean that's more kids than go to that entire school. I guarantee that.
So we're continuing this main event feud for the world title, and Down and Dirty this week is with Dirty White Boy and Dirty White Girl. And White Boy's trying to get a certain match signed with Brian Lee, and White Boy says if he can have the match he wants signed, there's no way Brian Lee can get away from him. White Boy is purposely avoiding the name of the match and says the whole world will know when Lee signs the contract. So we'll know that very soon. We're not going to spoil it here for you guys yet, but angle advancement and fitting in with these 3 title matches, you had enhancing and moving ahead stories that were moving towards Sunday Bloody Sunday, where I thought this was really well done. And stipulation upon stipulation, I guess that's the old mentality because they're drawing houses on a monthly basis, trying to bring people in the door, and nothing draws more than whether it be a ladder match, a cage match, or someone's getting their head shaved or someone's leaving town. Like, that is part of what is the allure of you have to see it today because you don't know what you're going to miss. It's the sales job on Jim Cornette's end. But I thought it really made sense here because these two guys hate each other. You need to put a stipulation in place to keep them from running away. And then we'll see what the stipulation is. We'll talk about it, but it is very evident that they make it make sense, even though there's a lot of stipulations on every single card.
Yeah, no, they do a good job with that. But I do want to take a second to just shout out to Love the Dirty White Boy because he's such a gritty, late 80s wrestling character that's just chilling in 94 here. Kills it, man. It's such a fun little interview.
So touching upon the Ricky Morton and Chris Candido match, this was a fun match as well. With Chris Candido avoiding a hip toss, and a couple times we get Robert Gripson and Bobby Blaze entering the ring and telling Morton something, causing Morton to leave the ring and running backstage. We get Candido winning by countout. Really cool to see Ricky Morton and Candido mix it up here in a singles format. Ricky Morton, of course, part of the tag team Rock and Roll Express, but seeing what he's able to do in the ring shows again how important he is to the roster. And every championship is up for grabs. Even if you're a tag team competitor, you're still going after singles competitors. And Chris Candido putting that title on the line, as you mentioned, every week for the TV championship. This is what a TV title should be. This is how you build stars and get people important, because any given day, of course, we had 3 title matches here. You know you're going to get 1 championship match every time you tune into Smoky Mountain Wrestling. And that, a lot of times, is enough to get people to tune in.
Yeah. Back in the 94s, it probably was a lot, though. And that just goes to show you Cornette's brain of marketing. Like, you're going to see a championship match every time you tune in. You know, it's not Miss TV, man. And I love it.
Yeah, and that's a big contrast to like the WWF product at the time. You know, it was like you're not going to see a champion. You're not going to see Hogan walk out with the belt every time. He's not on TV all that often, man. You know, being able to go to a smaller, and you're going to be able to see somebody walk out with a belt every single week. That's huge. It's a good draw.
Absolutely. And we have the main event here for the title. Not much to talk about. Bobby Blaze loses to Brian Lee, and it was essentially a squash match, as we always like to talk about. But Bobby Blaze got some offense in. There was a flurry at one point to make it interesting. But Brian Lee defends the championship successfully, moving on further against. He's going to face Dirty White Boy. There's no way he was losing the title, but it was cool to see the title defended here. Smoky Mountain Gold. All the titles are beautiful, by the way. Got to mention that as well. You go on eBay and find the bootleg versions of them if you want close-up looks, but these championships are absolutely beautiful. The tag titles and the world title, even the TV championship, all feel, I don't know, there's something to be said about championships looking good, and it takes the title to the next level. When I saw these titles, like, God damn, these are beautiful. I don't think people talk about them aesthetically as they should.
Yeah, no, it's 90% of the battle is the presentation, obviously, so kudos to the design crew, man. They came out beautiful.
And then the final segment here, Tracy Smothers being interviewed to end the program. Tracy's really mad about the Heavenly Bodies and Jim Cornette, what they did to Ricky Morton's father. Smothers says that Ricky Morton's going to get his revenge, and Smothers is going to make Chris Candido famous when they step in the ring. He says he's coming right for Candido, and he's pissed that Candido cost him the heavyweight championship. And we know that Smothers got a concussion due to Candido's interference, and says that 1994 we'll see the South rise again. So again, it's in good. He has good intent, but again, this is one of those things that 2023, you're not really on TV saying the South rising again type of stuff. But Tracy Smothers, babyface, and he has the best intentions.
Yeah, most definitely. It doesn't exactly age well.
So moving on to the 22nd of 1994, we have Chohawi High School again from Virginia. It's the same tapings as well, 350. So they had a back-to-back taping, and we have 4 matches. Not as strong of a card. Jason Hurd and Robbie Eagle defeating the Moondogs by DQ. Louis Spicoli defeating Jeff Victory. Prince Karras, who was short-lived, we saw in the newsletter. I skipped over, but he's someone that they were pushing and then disappeared pretty quickly. I think it's the only episode we're going to cover him. He defeated Jason West. And we had the TV championship on the line. Dirty White Boy taking on Chris Candido. Unfortunately for Dirty White Boy, title doesn't change hands on the DQ. He did get the win by DQ. Again, thoughts on this? I mean, we had February 13th, the Bruise Brothers returned from their suspension to take on the Moondogs inside of a steel cage on Sunday Bloody Sunday. That was kind of the emphasis on this show, Colton. And your thoughts on this? I mean, it wasn't not as strong as a card. If you put both of these guys together, it was like, all right, let's just see what they do for this final match of the TV championship. The rest was kind of just there.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It's obvious that this was they taped this in the same day at the last place, and definitely kind of the secondary show. I do want to touch on Prince Karis briefly because we probably just never will again.
Right?
But, yeah, we had heard mention of him in a couple previous episodes where his manager was saying, he's going to debut on this day. They bill him as a 3,000-year-old mummy. He's a big dude. I looked up his name. It's Rob Mays, I believe, is the wrestler's name. Not
Right.
somebody that I was familiar with in any other promotion or any other work at that point. But like, dude's got a great size. But yeah, he was a terrifying looking. Like they did him up as a mummy. He had fucking dust coming off of him when he first got in the ring for this match. Man, this was not what I expected. And obviously, it was pretty. It did not necessarily fit with everything else that they were trying to do with Smoky Mountain Wrestling. So obvious that it was tried out, kind of tested with the crowd in a room that they'd already had a show in. And yeah, it obviously was kind of a case of throwing spaghetti up against the wall and seeing if it stuck. I don't believe Prince Karis was a noodle that stuck.
So we talked about Louis Spicoli, I think ECW season, Mike, and his unfortunate passing. I think maybe it was the 1998 season we talked about because he died. Yeah, February 15th, 1998, age 27. This is one of those cautionary tales where people are talking about the inherent drug use in the wrestling world. And he was someone that everyone kind of gravitated towards as a untapped potential. 27 years old. We saw him have a cup of coffee in ECW, had a little bit of work in WWF, but this is his debut here. And Spicoli's being promoted as a challenger to Chris Candido. And we're going to see him kind of pop in and out during this. But this is the first time we formally kind of were introduced to him in the ring. And the first thing I pulled away from, very good look. And I think he has someone that was like, all right, this guy can actually go out and work. I mean, when him and Candido get in the ring together, there's something to be said about the two of these guys working. Of course, they work a different show, but Spicoli is someone, with Jeff Victory getting the win here, felt like they had some momentum behind him.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. Seeing baby Louis Spicoli too this is a trip. And I was such a Louis Spicoli mark. I mean, I've talked about it a lot during our ECW season, and this. It's so cool to see. That's one of my favorite parts of our show here is going back and seeing debuts of people that I maybe been long forgotten about in the wrestling community. But I every time I see his name pop up, a little smile in my heart, and he did great here, man. They we're on the verge of capturing lightning in the bottle with so many talents down here at Smoky Mountain. Louis was definitely one of the prominent ones.
So before we talk about the main event here with Chris Candido and Dirty White Boy, you mentioned before Prince Karis and had me thinking about the most ridiculous gimmicks in wrestling history. And for a traditionalist type of promotion that prides itself on wrestling the way it should be, what are your thoughts about the mindset of bringing someone like Prince Karis in? Is it just one of those things that's an outlier that shocks you because it's so different than what they were doing? Or is this just like their presentation of what they believe WWF was doing on their side, WCW? Like, what is the mindset of bringing a guy like this in? Because 3,000 years old, this feels so goofy and doesn't fit what Smoky Mountain is.
No, not at all, man. I've kind of been racking my brain to figure out like who got this past Cornette again that they thought this was a good idea. Like, yeah, I don't know, man. It's maybe they had their own equivalent of a Vince Russo kind of doing an internship for them. It's like, man, I got this great idea, and they're like, man, just fucking let him try it so he'll shut the hell up about it. Like, just get it. Let's put it on and show him it's not over, and then we don't ever have to do it ever again. I don't know. It was. I would definitely rank it with like some of the most ridiculous gimmicks of all time. It's got to be in the top 10 list. But I mean, at the same time, I thought it was. I don't know. I kind of liked it. It's not something I necessarily want to see a lot more of, but I thought it was just so out of left field for this type of promotion that I thought it was pretty unique, and it did kind of stick with me. I was just like, because like I said, weeks prior they had been hyping up this Prince Karis character. But I had no idea he was going to be a resurrected mummy until he got on stage. I thought we were going to get like some like Egyptian like prince, do like some Egyptian royalty cat coming out here to come whip somebody's ass. I had no idea that it was going to be, a Halloween, a costume special. So yeah, I'm not sure who got this past corny here, but yeah, it obviously didn't land.
It was
Halloween
cool.
character in the middle of January. It's best time to debut him.
There's a cool video on Squared Circle. It looks like 31 Days of Obscure Wrestling Characters, number 11. Prince Karras is highlighted here. And they talk about how Karras was the name of a mummy in 1940s Universal series. But also, someone made, in defense of this gimmick, they were saying it's not unlike The Undertaker being controlled by a magical force, being the urn, and he's controlled by something different. I think looking at it, though, as a mummy, it just never, similar to Giant Gonzalez, when you brought him in, that was never going to get over ever.
No.
Like, no matter what, it never was going to get to a place where that was going to be something people gravitate towards. But it's short-lived. It's ridiculous. We're still talking about it today in 2023. So I guess it did its job.
We opened up the tomb of Prince Karras.
Seriously, guys, I want you to Google Prince Karras, and this is a guy that I was not familiar with. This was as ridiculous as anything we've seen in any promotion at any given time. And I guess what makes it even more shocking is it takes place under the guise and promotion of Smoky Mountain Wrestling, which prides itself on tradition. And I just can imagine Jim Cornette doing, like, can you imagine what he would react if this type of character appeared on AEW television? His head would explode.
Yeah, he'd be like, some spooky spaghetti monster walking out of my fucking television with dust farting out of his ass.
Oh my God.
Well,
I'm so here for it.
To come to Karras's defense just a little bit, to be devil's advocate, the presentation was not cheap. He didn't look like a Spirit Halloween costume knockoff. Like, it was pretty, like, the eyes and the mouth were completely blacked out and kind of looked like they were leaking juices a little bit. Like, I can imagine being like a 7 or 8 year old kid being fucking terrified of Prince Karras coming out of the ring.
Yeah, so we'll talk more about him, I guess. I'm going to do some more research about maybe some shooting interviews with Jim Cornette references. I'm sure he's asked about it. He talks about it. He has hours upon hours of podcasting, so I'm sure there's an opportunity for him to discuss it and what his feelings are now, what his defense are. Maybe he has no defense. Who knows? But I'm very curious to hear him talk about it. But main event-wise, Chris Candido and Dirty White Boy have a really good match here. More storyline progression. This is a match, of course, for the TV championship. Chris Candido just won it last week. But we see the ending with Tracy Smothers running in the ring, cleans house, strikes, and makes the save after Dirty White Girl gets in and holds Candido in the corner. Brian Lee clotheslines White Boy plants White Boy with a DDT. So chaos building up towards this main event at Sunday Bloody Sunday. The show at its core is building towards a bigger event, and that is the function of TV. The TV, and it's a different mindset. We have to immerse ourselves back into 1994 and remember that the TV wasn't about popping a huge rating. It was about progressing stories and getting people to come in person and consuming the product, buy the merchandise. So this did its job. I mean, they're building towards one of the biggest events at the time in Smoky Mountain Wrestling's history. So for the last several months, people were saying it didn't feel like it was building towards anything, but having a destination for Sunday Bloody Sunday feels like February 13th is going to have a lot of blow-offs and some memorable moments. And it advanced a lot of storytelling. I think week after week, we're going to see them advancing storytelling and making people feel like there's going to be an end to this road. When you don't have these big events, pay-per-view or otherwise, it's hard to justify where these stories are going because it's very challenging to do a payoff on TV, especially during this time. 4 matches on, some compilations and clips and things like that. It's hard to pay off with the time you have. So you need a big event like Sunday Bloody Sunday to pay it off.
Yeah, I thought this was a cool setup. Kind of aligns, Candido with Brian Lee a bit, and then also juxtaposition lining up Tracy Smothers with Dirty White Boy. Tell me if I'm getting ahead of myself here, Ace, but this is the episode where towards the end we have the exchange in the interview between Tracy Smothers and Dirty White Boy, where they talk about where Tracy Smothers is talking about fighting as hard with Dirty White Boy as he did against him in the past.
Yes.
This is a great promo, man. I absolutely love this. This was very cool where, obviously it's not Tracy Smothers has got an issue with Candido and we got Dirty's got an issue with Brian Lee. So, guys that have, obviously Dirty White Boy and Tracy Smothers have been at odds in the past. These guys are both kind of larger than life Southern personalities that don't necessarily line up. Dirty White Boys, his name says it all. He's a dirty white boy. He's a little bit greasier. You get the Wild Eye Southern Boy that all the moms and grandmas and aunts who are in the crowd absolutely love, Tracy Smothers. That's who you'd much rather see. I think Tracy Smothers showing up your house to take your daughter out than Dirty White Boy on his Harley. So, but the fact that they're able to set aside their differences here, and I just really enjoyed that line with Tracy Smothers. He's like, we haven't always seen eye to eye, but I promise that I'll fight as hard with you as I did against you. And that's just really, really good storytelling, building that alliance.
So before we get to the event that is known as Sunday Bloody Sunday, we have more TV to get into. And the last one of January is from the 29th. The same Chehaui, Virginia High School. Attendance still 350. 3 matches on the docket. Smoky Mountain U.S. Junior Heavyweight Champion Chris Candido defeated Louis Spicoli to retain the title. So I asked you guys quick, did they switch over the titles in the middle of is he a different champion here? Because it's the Beat the Champ TV champion and also the U.S. Junior Heavyweight Champion of Smoky Mountain Wrestling. Are they the same belt? Because now he's defending it on TV as the U.S. Junior Heavyweight Champion. So I was just confused as far as what the difference was. And maybe we'll get more clarification as it goes on. But in my notes, I'm like, the ring announcer, even though he's reading the paper like this, he's holding it up. He announces this is the U.S. Junior Heavyweight Championship match for Chris Candido, and he never won the belt, and he came out without the TV title. So I'm like, where'd the TV title go?
I'm confused by it too. I think he holds both belts because I remember in an earlier interview, like maybe first or second episode, that he references he's still the junior heavyweight title as well as the TV title holder. So I think Candido I don't even know if the junior heavyweight title is a Smoky Mountain Wrestling belt. I think Candido might have shown up with that belt from another promotion and holds both. So not 100% clear, but that's at this point in the progression, that's what my theory is on it.
Yeah, because I'm looking back at the 115 and there is a segment on here that says that he brought this U.S. championship belt out with him. But he is defending the TV championship against Ricky Morton. So I think you're right, Colton. You're onto something where he's both champions. He just showed up with, and it has the moniker SMW on it. So it is a Smoky Mountain Wrestling Championship. So we'll get more clarification on as we go on, but was interesting to see him. And this is the in-between of without social media and things like this, where they're not popping up and saying, we have a new championship announced. We're leveling up the All-Atlantic Championship. It's now the international championship, but very, very much the same energy. Anyway, he's defending that championship against Louis Spicoli. He defeated Louis in a pretty decisive way. We have Rock and Roll Express defeating Jason West and the son, Jason Hurd. And we also have Dirty White Boy taking on Killer Kelly. The match ends in DQ with Dirty White Boy getting the win. Opening the show with a promo from Louis Spicoli talking about he came from California for a title shot against Chris Candido, and he isn't leaving without a world title. Short thing, a very cookie cutter promo. But Mike, you're a Louis Spicoli fan. You like what he did. This was you see kind of the glimpse into who he could have been. Again, gone way too soon.
Yeah, no, you get a really good feel. I mean, he's green as goose shit here too, so you got to keep that in thought. But so this is an outstanding promo for somebody that's barely got their rugs in. But yeah, you could see the glimmer of hope of what his career could have been. I mean, he's very well spoken, really well put together package, and it's a shame that we lost him so early. But this is I'm so here to see him work with the likes of Candido and all these other names on here, man. It's awesome. So it was good shit.
Yeah, I mean, good match here. We saw some good stuff. It was quick again, of course, but Chris Candido gets the win. Tammy gets involved, who we also have not really talked about. Tammy, she's going by the name Tammy Fitch here. So they rebrand her on the WWF side as Tammy Sitch.
The famous
ECW, and then she becomes Sunny as well. So that Dark Side of the Ring kind of put in perspective when you watch them interacting here. The Dark Side of the Ring that just aired this season makes it hit a little different when you watch the two of them on screen to think about how dark it really became for the both of them.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we also have Jim Cornette interviewed regarding Sunday Bloody Sunday, and he says, I'm looking forward to the Texas Death Match at the event between Terry Funk and the Bullet. Cornette doesn't believe that Funk will lose the match at Sunday Bloody Sunday. If you notice too, it's very old school rhythmic where it's just like he says the name of the event and the date multiple times to get it in your brain so you don't forget it. He says Sunday Bloody Sunday, I think 4 or 5 times in a minute and a half span. And he said, I'm going to make sure that the last act of Bob Armstrong will be kissing my goddamn feet. So good promo from Jim Cornette and low-key hyped for this. I was like, Terry Funk and the Bullet, man. Like, I'm here for this. Bob Armstrong, as we know, under a mask, wink, wink. We don't know it's him, but it is. And the Texas Death Match, another stipulation that we've come quite familiar with. It looks a little different in 1994 than it does in 2023 with the different rules. but at the core of it, it's just to really put an emphasis and an end on a feud, and that's what it needs between. Funk is just a replacement for Jim Cornette, obviously, because he can't take the the battle to Bob Armstrong because he wants to, but Terry Funk is kind of a mercenary at large for Jim Cornette in this regard.
Yeah.
So we also have Down and Dirty this week with Dutch, and it's with Jim Cornette and the SMW tag titles, the Heavenly Bodies. Cornette promotes the match with Mike and Doug Furness, and they said if they lose, they will have to wear an Alabama sweatshirt in Knoxville. So Cornette thinks the Express have gone insane or trying to kill him for no reason. If the Express put their hands on Cornette, then Morton and Gibson will be suspended. Ricky and Robert come running down, and Ricky is held back on the outside. Cornette is just being his best, taunting Morton in the ring because Morton can't touch him. So we'll get a Ricky and Robert interview after, but I have to touch on this, Colton, as far as this Alabama sweatshirt business. I know, does this mean anything as far as Kentucky goes? I mean, Alabama, the Crimson Tide, explain that to us.
All right, man. So especially for SEC schools, which is Southeastern Conference for the college sports, it is like a religion down here. And it is, I mean, Kentucky is a little bit removed from the football conversation. We're much more a basketball school. I'm sure, if anybody who's a familiar University
go
of Kentucky.
Wildcats.
Yeah, go Cats, baby. I've got all kinds of Cats gear down here. We might it's not necessarily been the last best couple of years, but we might as well be the 33rd NBA team most of the time. We're about the best to ever do it. But there's a lot of pride in Southeastern Conference school sports, and especially between, the Tennessee Volunteers and the Alabama Crimson Tide. I do have one friend who actually attended both schools, went to Alabama, or who's from Tennessee, and so for different degrees went to both schools. But yeah, I mean, it's for these regions, you don't even have to go to these schools to feel this level of pride with them, because Kentucky, Tennessee, and Alabama. Tennessee's got a professional hockey team and a professional football team, but that's both in the last 25 years. Yeah. These, we don't have professional teams down here. So our college teams are our professional teams. So you got people who've never taken a college course in their life who are massive Alabama football fans, or it's almost, it's a major part of their identity. And yeah, there's plenty of, I guarantee that there is fans in Knoxville who would just as soon die than ever wear an Alabama sweatshirt. Ever. And vice versa. It goes both ways, as a Kentucky fan, man, I'm never wearing Tennessee orange ever. Not going to happen. And, I don't really, like I said, we're not much of a football school. So I don't really, even though we're in the same conference, we don't usually get our, get that close in the fight. So I don't really have any problem with Alabama, but man, yeah, when it comes to basketball, yeah, there's no way I'm not wearing, I would never make a bet that would force me to wear an Alabama shirt to a Kentucky game or anything like that. I'm just not even gonna approach that.
Love it. And this is exactly why that we want to talk about it here, because this is a big stipulation and they hype it up like it's the end of the world. So it obviously resonated with a lot of the fans in attendance here. So very big. And we see this throughout sports as well. And also in wrestling, that they utilize the sports teams locally and otherwise to get people involved and to get some cheap heat as well. You could wear whatever team you're in Boston, wear a Yankees jersey. If you're, you can wear an Astros jersey now if you're in New York, but same thing can be said. Anything that will garner heat. I remember when they were in MSG, they were wearing the Trae Young jersey for the Hawks, and that was resonating heat and getting people to react. And it just, some people may look at it as cheap, but I just think it's another layer of getting people. It's an igniter. It's like using those self-light coals for a barbecue. You have to keep it lit, but it's a nice start. So we also have the SMW Heavyweight Championship. Brian Lee, he is with Tammy Fitch being interviewed. Tammy is on the mic a little bit. She's upset because they just announced the chain match, the return of Ron Wright, and she said Lee might get killed in the match and can't believe, and she can't believe he's going to take this match, and he can't believe Tammy's more worried about her clothes because they've really been talking about getting blood on her clothes. That was the other thing they kept saying, is that she may get blood all over her clothes. This was well done, and this is kind of the first personality we see in 1994 on our end of Brian Lee getting a little bit more of a shine here as the champion. It feels like he has a little more reverence behind him, Mike.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's awesome because I mean, we see the hardcore links that Brian Lee eventually becomes, but it's cool to see him in such a prominent spot here, and probably where his potential is. I could have seen Brian Lee a world champion, in ECW or anywhere, but this is so good. I love Tammy. Tammy's such a prude, snooty rich girl, like got that vibe. It's awesome.
I love the moniker the first lady of Smoky Mountain Wrestling. Like, she fits it so well, man. Yeah, she's bitching about what her dry cleaning bill is going to be if she gets blood splatter on her clothes. It's just great.
Man, in our main event here, Dirty White Boy taking on Killer Kelly in what feels like a warm-up match for this world title. And then Killer Kyle, I'm sorry, so Killer Kelly, that's from Impact over here, but Killer Kyle took the work to Dirty White Boy in this match. I mean, Kyle was shoving White Boy from the start of the match, frustrating him in the open moments, and there's some back and forth here where, I mean, of course, the shenanigans happen after Brian Lee runs into the ring. White Boy fights off the heels with strikes. We got Tammy punching Dirty White Girl. Chris Candido comes out here. He whacks White Boy over the back with a violin case. Dirty White Boy is held down on the canvas while Lee goes down on top of him and gets hit in the crotch by Smothers. Absolute chaos at this point. The referee and the suspenders lost control of the whole match. Smothers fights the heels with punches until White Boy gets the chain and starts choking him, and White Boy's hanging over the top rope. So really good visual. The match itself was okay, but the aftermath is what really sold it for me. They're really kind of meeting a whole bunch of masters here where there's like building towards a lot of different programs and making people say, I have to find a way to watch Sunday Bloody Sunday.
Yeah, no, the hype's there. The buildup is strong. You could have went into this not giving a shit about anybody, but you walked out feeling like the importance of Sunday Bloody Sunday. So I think they did deliver. I think they did a great job with it.
So our go-home show for that is also in Chilhowie, Virginia. Attendance 350, still Chilhowie High School. We have 4 matches. Jason West and Jeff Victor defeated the Moondogs by DQ. Bobby Blaze defeated Brian Keys. Robbie Eagle defeated the SMW Beat the Champ TV champion Chris Candido to win the championship. And the tag titles on the line. The Heavenly Bodies defeated Rock and Roll Express by DQ. So we have a lot to be said about this. A lot of good stuff. The title changing hands with Robbie Eagle, that was surprising, especially since Candido just won it. Big piece here is that I guess they want everyone to believe at any time, Colton, the title can change hands.
Yeah, you don't see that kind of stuff in modern day booking anymore, man. I mean, I can't remember the last time I saw a title change hands on the go home show before a pay-per-view. So I like that element. It really, keeps it fresh, gives it this guise of, it's all real and it's all happening in real time. And then, yeah, that's definitely a cool element, man. They do a really good job building up this pay-per-view, or this, I guess, super card, as you would call it.
Yeah, so keeping the energy with this feud, Tracy Smothers is the one that cost Candido the match, yanks Candido in the middle rope, and Eagle gets the pinfall following that. I was really impressed with Candido's ability to control the match, and we know that Tracy Smothers was going to get involved in some capacity. Didn't know the title would be changing hands here. After the match, we got Tracy Smothers coming in the ring, and Candido and him are beating each other up, and we got Smothers coming off the top rope and is met with a kick to the gut, and Candido plants Smothers with a pile driver, and then Candido bails as Dirty White Boy enters the ring. So title changes hands, but Candido comes out smelling like roses a little bit here, and especially if you're watching for star power, work rate, whatever, Chris Candido was the guy who shined over Robbie Eagle to me.
Yeah, man, 100%. It's Chris Candido, another guy that was gone too soon. His work rate really shows through here. Him, Tracy, and Dirty White Boy, some of the best talent they have in ring by far.
So before we get to this tag title match where the titles change hands, they don't change hands, it's DQ. But before we get it, we have a nice Jim Cornette interview again with the Heavenly Bodies with the titles in tow. Jim Cornette was talking about going to Penn State, to the Furnace Brothers being from Tennessee. Cornette reminds us that Ricky Morton and Robert Gibson will be suspended if they touch Cornette other than a match between Express and the Bodies. Pritchard says that Ricky Morton's father entered the locker room to use the restroom, and they took him out because he started it. So they're really tying in family lineage here and beating up Ricky Morton's dad. Before Edge was beating up John Cena's dad, we have them doing it here in Smoky Mountain Wrestling. And Cornette says they will be wrestling. Wow, Dave Meltzer and Wade Keller. He mentions Dave Meltzer, and there's a cool video. There's a very, very cool video on online where I think they are watching. Maybe it's the Bluegrass Brawl. There's a video where it's Jim Cornette. I think I sent it to you, Belcaster, a couple months ago, where it's Jim Cornette and Dave Meltzer watching along from like 1995, 1996, where they're watching along an old school Smoky Mountain Wrestling event, which was kind of surreal to hear them talk about it and hear them kind of collaboratively working together.
Yeah, no, that's a cool thing too. But that's the fun about this. There's so much stuff like that out on the internet. So if you want to deep dive more into this shit, you get to watch, Cornette and Meltzer fucking breaking it down together.
So the match was okay. I mean, decent match. It was more of a little program and angle advancement since the two teams will meet at the big event coming up next week. And the finish pretty much shows that there really is a reason to have the match forward because of the DQ that happens. But Colton, what are your thoughts on this? I mean, the DQ finish feels like a cop-out, but Mike and I are used to that. Last season, Shot of Nostalgia, everything was a goddamn DQ, but kind of the right choice, obviously, with the Heavenly Body. You're not going to want to change the title so soon going into Sunday Bloody Sunday, which is what people are kind of waiting to see.
Yeah, I mean, a DQ is always a little bit of a cop-out, but I feel like there's not a better place to use it than at a go-home show for something like this. It's, you definitely don't want two titles changing hands right before a supercard or a pay-per-view event, because what's the point of even having an event? We're going to change all the titles before we get to this big show that we've been spent 2 months building up. But, I mean, I think this is good here. I mean, they've done a good job of building up Heavenly Bodies versus the Rock and Roll Express. I absolutely love the storyline of the attack on Paul Morton. That really gets the goat of Southern fans, man. I mean, I can hear the mamaws in the crowd being like, he hit his daddy. Did you see that? Really firing people up, man. I mean, you get these old women out here like giving the bird to Tom Pritchard and Jim Cornette and Jimmy DeLorean, because like they're fighting mad about this shit because they're very invested, and just the irreverent promo work we've seen the weeks leading up where they're joking about Paul Morton being blind after being beat up and having Jimmy DeLorean coming out acting like he's Stevie Wonder and calling himself Paul Morton, like just really dastardly shit, man. I mean, I think they did a good job. They didn't even really need this match. The only reason they did is because they had it basically on every show leading up. So, DQ finish is the obvious choice here. And, it definitely, I think it encourages the fans to make sure they get to at least watch Bloody Sunday or make their way down there, because, you kind of got let down with this DQ finish and you want to see the payoff.
Yeah. And the thing is too, we'll talk about it when we get to, because our next show is Sunday Bloody Sunday, is they do the DQ finish again between the two teams, which is like, why the fuck would you do that again? But I don't know. Interesting, because I guess you continue to kind of pull that carrot and try to string people along to get them to watch the next month and keep them coming back.
I guess, man. I mean, that personally, as a fan, if I had gone to both shows and saw the DQ finish twice, I'd have been pretty hot about it. But I mean, that's, I guess they're milking every last drop out of the storyline, because I mean, once you change the titles, where do you go from there? I mean, the tag division and Smoky Mountain at this point, what we've seen, there's not necessarily a whole lot. It's pretty much been the Heavenly Bodies and the Rock and Roll Express. That's pretty much it. So, maybe if they're still struggling with getting, besides the Moondogs, but these guys are just coming out with, and the Bruise Brothers who've been on suspension. But, maybe they're stretching out a little more because they're waiting on Chris Jericho and Lance Storm to get their visas cleared or whatever else and be ready to go. Maybe they got to buy another week or two before they can bring another team into the fold for the tag team hunt.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we're going to talk about Sunday Bloody Sunday. I think the most old school thing I've seen here is the fact that the Moondogs versus the Bruise Brothers in the main event, only because the goddamn cage had to be built. So they're like, fuck it. It's the last match. Don't give a shit. It's going to be the last match. And I don't give a shit.
Very indie. Very, very indie.
Mike, I know you can appreciate that. I've working in the independents as well as I do. Building a cage, an independent cage, is very hard in a high school gym, man. Sweating your ass off carrying that with it's not easy. So I understand why it went on last at the Knoxville Civic.
I couldn't imagine doing it in the South in the middle of winter, because it's like summertime up here in Chicago. So
we have Smoky Mountain Wrestling presents Sunday Bloody Sunday from 21394 Knoxville, Tennessee, the Knoxville Civic Coliseum. Attendance, man, 3,950, a good house, man. We talked about 4,000 being the cap of where they get to. This is one of those shows that drew the biggest houses. The energy of a show like this is so much different than these 350 tape shows in front of it. This kind of shows you what Smoky Mountain Wrestling is and could be. If they were able to run shows consistently like this one, I think they'd still be around.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, most definitely. I mean, that's a huge. So I've been to the Knoxville Civic Coliseum one time. I saw Slayer, Megadeth, and Anthrax play there in 2010. It was a fucking incredible show, and pretty lawless crowd all around. But it was so the capacity for that venue is 6,500. So them getting 4,000 in there is that's major, man. Yeah, it's a big deal.
So we open up, which probably was the match of the night here. Chris Candido with Tammy Finch taking on Tracy Smothers. And this match was really good, man. The blood feud that has been with these guys, Tracy Smothers being the babyface here. My one critique of this match was the finish, really, with Candido having to cheat to do this. And he decked Smothers with a chain. The referee was turned around. The old spot here, the ref is distracted. Definitely a great way to open the show. The finish to me was a little anticlimactic, especially with Candido not having at some point, though, like he feels athletically gifted enough where he doesn't need to cheat. Maybe that's just my fandom showing through. I didn't think he needed to do this, but they are protecting Tracy Smothers going forward. A mix of good brawling in this match, fast-paced action. If you're looking for a Chris Candido match to check out, this one's right there, man. This was a good match.
Yeah, I thought the finish was very akin to, a Wardlow throwing the ring to MJF.
True.
Them,
I mean, okay.
So you got a little bit of, and like you said, it very much protected Tracy Smothers. So, I mean, I thought it was done elegantly. We'll put it that way.
So our next match here, Colton, you want your thoughts on this match?
And it solidifies Chris Candido as a heel, and it protects the good Wild-Eye Southern boy Smothers in the eyes of the fans.
True. Yeah, I think it's my fandom of Chris Candido shining through. I was like, really, couldn't beat Tracy Smothers clean here, but it is what it is. He is playing the heel, and I guess I'm being worked here from 1994. But we move on to another stipulation match, a football helmet on a pole match. Doug Furnas and Mike Furnas taking on the Heavenly Bodies, Jimmy Del Rey and Tom Pritchard. We have the mother of Doug and Mike in the front row of this match, and the whole time Del Rey's taunting them with a T-shirt on the floor, and this is pretty much going on throughout the whole match. Match was okay. I mean, the one thing I pulled as well, Mike Furnas, dude, is one of the most, what's the nice way of saying this? One of the most awkward guys, I think, to ever step foot in a wrestling ring. His gait, his walk, everything about him feels like he shouldn't be a professional wrestler, and he is. But the Furnas brothers, dude, I mean, for everything that was involved here, they're so over with the crowd. And then we get involved into the Rock and Roll Express at the end to get involved and take Cornette out and toss the helmet to Doug, and that's the finish here. Adds tension in the match for later on. So kind of cool angle advancement, very fun match that kept things going. And as much as I'm hating on Mike Furnas as being an awkward guy, it worked for him. It kind of fit the aesthetic, and his brother Doug was the same thing. These guys had a certain look that wasn't seen anywhere else, and they got the win over the Heavenly Bodies, which was a really big deal. Jimmy Del Rey and Tom Pritchard are a pretty well-established tag team, former tag champs that need to be looked at with prestige.
Yeah, man, that's a big deal. The Furnas brothers getting this win here, man. But I'm also just very happy for their sake that they did not lose and have to put on an Alabama sweatshirt in their hometown. I mean, true. I'm pretty sure the Furnas brothers are both former Tennessee football players, so they're hometown boys. And like I said, the Civic Center is about a mile from the University of Tennessee's football field. So I mean, their gates can be as awkward and as long as they need to be. They're going to be over like Rover in the hometown of Knoxville, and no matter what. Yeah.
So just to be clear, they are the tag champs, and the titles were not on the line in this match, right? Because the Heavenly Bodies had double duty. So I misspoke there. The titles just were not on the line here. So I guess it also says Doug Furnas and Mike Furnas have a legitimate claim to say they should get a title shot if they beat the champions.
Yeah, you would think so.
Very, very interesting. As we move to our next match, it is the aforementioned Texas Death Match we've been looking forward to. The Bullet, Barb Armstrong taking on Terry Funk, and Terry Funk has Jim Cornette in the corner. And this is one of those guys that feels like a connection that doesn't seem like it's cohesive, but goddamn, it worked. Jim Cornette and Terry Funk work really well together, Mike Belcaster.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. Obviously, what you can tell from a lot of these episodes, you can put Jim Cornette in the middle of anything.
You're right.
It's going to taste
100%.
great, man. so I mean, perfect pairing. Throw him with Funk against Bob Orton. You're got a fucking win-win combination there. But this was fun. I can never say shit about a Terry Funk match. It's always a good time. This was just as good, and we got the first ever moonsault from fucking the Funker, man. That's crazy.
Legend has it. 100%.
I'm buying it. I'm going for it.
That was through my research. It feels like it's the first time he used it. And there's conversation in Terry Funk interviews that he said he just broke it out to kind of stick out. And this timeline fits that time that he would have broke this out in 1994, and just shows his ability to adapt and his flexibility. And he gets, a lot of stuff in here. And we have Bullet Barb Armstrong getting the win with a DDT on top of chairs for the 3 count. Funk was trying to get his feet on the ropes, but couldn't do that. Jim Cornette gets involved after. He attacks Bob Armstrong with the tennis racket. Funk gets in some cheap shots, and Cornette still wants Armstrong to kiss his feet. He's like, dude, you're still kissing my feet, no matter what. Belcaster, what would that sound like?
Come on. Kiss my feet, damn it. I don't care if I won or lost the match. You're getting over here. You're getting on your belly and walking across that damn ring. Kiss my toes.
Terry Funk grabs his branding iron and is trying to brand Brett Armstrong, but out comes Tracy Smothers to make the save. As far as the full match, it is what you'd expect. It wasn't the best hardcore brawl. There's a few spots that felt really awesome, but these matches are kind of tough to watch, to look at with the same lens we look at with hardcore matches, especially the ones we watched throughout ECW. The moonsault by Funk was awesome, and it was historic since the first time he pulled it off in his career. But the aftermath was more of the same with SMW. It's the kind of the formula they use here to get, the face in peril and then someone make the save. Who better than Tracy Smothers, who the crowd just adores?
Love it.
So we have the tag team championship. The Heavenly Bodies are back in action again. They're taking on the Rock and Roll Express. And this is the blood feud, man. This is something that feels like it should have been much longer. But I guess since they were in action already and they have something bigger planned, this never really got off the ground. And I guess there was more angle advancement than storytelling of the match. And I guess they're moving the goalpost towards something different, continue to tell the story going forward. This was not the payoff, the finale. This felt like a TV angle advancement with a DQ finish here at the end, with Cornette getting involved and the referee calling for the bell. Especially what just happened on TV, Colton. Like, I felt like they should have gone up to a level where we at least got a finish and like have the Heavenly Bodies go over and retain the titles, but done in a dastardly way.
Yeah, most definitely. This seems like a little bit of a even bigger cop out than having a DQ finish at the go home show. It's like, and I don't know, I'm kind of confused in general as to why Heavenly Bodies, if they're pulling double duty in one night, if they're defending the titles. I mean, obviously I don't expect them to go, in an absolute banger for their second match of the night and pull, a 20-30 minute tag belt bout against the Rock and Roll Express. But yeah, kind of weird, interesting booking here. So that, I've been really impressed and happy with the other booking that we've seen from Smoky Mountain in these first couple months. This one just kind of left me scratching my head a little bit. So I'm interested to see where they go going forward.
So our other match should be the main event, but of course we mentioned the independent cage situation. We have the SMW Heavyweight Championship on the line in a chain match. Dirty White Boy taking on Brian Lee, the defending champion, with Tammy Fitch in his corner. Match was really good as far as what these guys are able to do, and we wound up having a title change. I mean, it's nowhere near the first match we got between White Boy and Smothers based on reviews, but it was pretty good, and we get Wright involved at the end with some involvement as well. But a title change on this event, people seemed excited that Dirty White Boy is now the champion. We get Tammy furious with Brian Lee losing the belt, but we get more angle advancement going forward. And now we look for what are they going to do with Dirty White Boy now that he finally has the championship in tow.
Yeah, this is a huge payoff here, man. I did not necessarily expect Dirty White Boy to walk away with the belt here. I'm glad that he did. That guy's promos are just absolutely tops, man. He's an incredible interview, and yeah, this is exciting here, man. Tammy's she plays an upset, spoiled little rich white girl very, very well, man. So yeah, it's cool to see Dirty get the belt here, and be interested to see who's if they continue this program with Brian Lee, kind of chasing him to get it back, or if we get another opponent coming for him.
So we had Ron Wright getting involved in this match, and he's the guy kind of played the foiler for Brian Lee in this. And I'm looking up Ron Wright, and I mean, he has a very not flattering gimmick that he used for a bit with the Nazi stuff going on it. But there is some history here. He wrestled under the Crusher, the Bone Cruncher, the Backstreet Brawler. He made his debut in January 21st, 1956, and retired not too long after this, August 12th, 1995. So he's from Rogersville, Tennessee. He's a guy who's pretty much maybe a legend there. I think he got the reaction he did because of his ability to resonate with the audience. I mean, he was, according to Wikipedia, he was the most hated heel in the territory for almost 3 decades, engaging in extremely physical, violent, and bloody matches, especially associated with his brother, Don. By the end of the 1970s, Ron Wright had mostly transitioned to an on-screen management role. They pretty much say his ability to draw heat was so great, he was legitimately shot 3 times by fans while being slashed with a razor, resulting in a wound that required 160 stitches. He also had his
Jesus.
personal plane burnt by persons unknown, possibly wrestling fans. Wright noted with regret that he caused 4 or 5 elderly spectators to have heart attacks over his antics. So he's a guy that resonates with fans. So
Living
Ron
the gimmick,
Wright,
brother.
so he resonates with fans in this area. Like the name didn't pop me at all. I'm like, I don't know who this guy is, but with him getting involved in kicking Lee, that is something that resonated with fans at this time.
Listen, if you're gonna get heat, you're gonna get heat. And
that's Roddy Piper level heat,
man.
dude. That's like Roddy Piper got stabbed. Like this dude took it as a badge of honor. 160 stitches. That's no paper cut, brother.
Yeah,
burnt down his plane.
Good Lord.
Anyway, so main event here for the cage match. The Bruise Brothers, Don Harris and Ron Harris, defeated the Moondogs. Not much to talk about this match. I mean, at this point, it was one of the worst cage matches, I think, by history that anyone's ever seen. So we get the Rock and Roll Express and Heavenly Bodies coming out, I guess, maybe to save the show, because this was the end. Maybe not leave a sour taste in your mouth, but not a great match here. I do like Moondog Rex and Moondog Spot, I have to say, but Don Harris and Ron Harris were not particularly pleasing as far as their moments in the ring together.
No, and their promos are really just, leave a lot to be desired too. They really just seem like a couple of guys just blown out of their gourds screaming at a camera. Like it's just, that leaves a little bit to be desired. I didn't necessarily have the biggest hopes for this, but yeah, I love Moondog Spot, Moondog Rex, man. These guys have a really wild look, and just the fact that you come to the ring with gnawing on animal bones is a pretty wild gimmick. That's going to win me over every time.
So we have our 2 final Smoky Mountain Wrestling TV shows from 219 and also 226 from Jellicoe, Tennessee. I think I'm pronouncing that right. I think the J is silent.
Yeah, it's Jellicoe around here.
Oh,
baby.
it is Jellicoe.
Yeah, just like Versailles, Kentucky, not Versailles.
I hear it. Hold me accountable. Fact check me over here. I love it.
It's Jellicoe.
Jellicoe High School attendance 300, so far shy from the 3950 we had at the show prior. But we have 2 matches on the 219 show. Well Done defeated Bobby Blaze and Anthony Michaels, and the TV championship defended Robbie Eagle against Larry Santo. One thing I want to know from that Larry Santo match, Chris Candido came out with Larry Santo saying that Santo has what it takes to beat Robbie Eagle. He says he's going to teach Santo how to beat Eagle in 5 minutes. He does not do that, but they're trying to build new stars here. But yeah, we also have the in-ring debut of Well Done in Smoky Mountain Wrestling. They're working in WWF at the time. It's an extended squash match, but Well Done winning the match after they hit a forearm strike on Michaels. But Well Done. This is the start of the emergence of weekly TV having WWF stars. And if you look at Well Done on their end, on WWF, people look at them as a jobber team, but this was a big deal that they're here in Jellicoe working SMW.
Yeah, man, cool to start seeing, some of these names that people are used to seeing weekly on WWF TV show up in these, small high school gyms, man. I mean, it's got to be a big deal for these local fans.
Yeah.
The other note on this is Lex Luger cut in a promo saying he looks forward to seeing everyone on March 10th as he will compete at the Armstrong family reunion in Marietta, Georgia. So it looks like we're going to have Lex Luger getting involved. Big fucking deal. Lex Luger involved. He's still a big star from WWF. He's not quite doing the Lex Express stuff, but he's just removed from that.
Yeah, no, that's huge. I mean, for any independent, let alone, one as high loved as Smoky Mountain. I mean, you get a name like Lex Luger and it's huge shit, man.
We also have Jeff Jarrett cutting a promo saying he's going to be involved in that Marietta show as well. So we have that involved. We have kind of the coronation of the SMW heavyweight champion, Dirty White Boy, and he's with Dirty White Girl getting interviewed. White Boy tells Brian Lee that if he wants the championship, then come over and take it. White Boy introduces footage of White Girl getting attacked by Brian Lee and Tammy Fitch in Knoxville. So this feud's not done. White Girl says it will be a cold day in hell that she gets her butt kicked while conscious. So maybe we're going to get a tag match between the two teams. Intergender type of stuff, but the title now is with Dirty White Boy, and the fans seem to be taking to it.
Yeah.
So we move to the 226 in Jellicoe, Tennessee. We have 3 matches. The Hornet defeated SMW, beat the TV champion Robbie Eagle to win the TV championship. Brian Lee defeated Anthony Michaels. And in our main event, the Rock and Roll Express and Bobby Blaze defeated Smoky Mountain Wrestling tag team champions, the Heavenly Bodies, and Killer Kyle in a 6-man tag match. So we also have Chris Candido coming out with the Hornet. He did the same exact thing he did the week before, saying this dude can beat you. And this time they did it. So he was able to do it. Now we have the Hornet as the new TV champion. Your guys' thoughts on that?
It's good that Candido didn't shit the bed twice with somebody, because that would have just took all the wind out of his sails. But it's cool. It's I like that they have Candido kind of bringing out these newer talents and saying, yeah, this guy's going to whoop your ass. Like it adds a value to the name instead of somebody just showing up there and debuting. And I think you need to do that, especially in 1994, establish the guy, give him some backbone as like a Chris Candido. It's only good for talent development.
So we also have the music video debut of the Thrill Seekers. They're in the woods having some fun. It's a music video of the tag team playing bumper cars, ice skating, having a day of full laughs. Chris Jericho and Lance Storm, that's our introduction on screen. I fucking love it. I posted this reel a little while ago of them on here. It doesn't get better than this. I love the shit out of it, and I want more of it.
Yeah, it's fun to see Lance Storm not being so serious. Absolutely.
he was not serious for many moments.
Yeah. This is awesome, man. This is a really great setup for them. You can tell, like, it's good that they spent the time and to put in these like music videos to kind of intro these guys to the crowd. I think it just really set up their debut even better than just having them come in and introduce them as two young kids out of Western Canada.
Yeah.
So in that 6-man tag in the main event here, nothing really stands out in the match. It's pretty much just basic as far as 6-man tags go. It didn't feature a lot of fast-paced stuff, but the aftermath advances the feud between the Bodies of the Express. We're not done yet. We're going to get more Heavenly Bodies and the Rock and Roll Express for the tag titles. At this point, though, you kind of have to capitalize. That's what I pulled from it. You kind of have to capitalize and have a payoff for people to feel like, why am I invested in the two of these teams if they're not going to have a payoff? Because you had the chance at Sunday Bloody Sunday, but now you have the next time you have a supercard event, you kind of have to pull the trigger and have a memorable match.
100%.
Yeah, I was almost kind of surprised here that they didn't, just put, and I guess they're just dragging it off for the payoff for a bigger venue and a bigger house and being able to draw a little bit more money. But I almost feel like they should have just paid it off right here and there. But, it's cool to see 6-man action. We haven't seen that from Smoky Mountain yet. So not in 1994.
Yeah.
Yeah. You didn't really see a lot of 6-man matches anywhere at the time. I mean,
right.
It's not a brand new concept at the time, but as far as on the WWF side, I don't think they were using that. I'd be hard pressed to say that you could find a lot of 6-man matches outside of here. Like this is one time, like I was kind of shocked to see it because it is something we're so familiar with nowadays.
Yeah, 100%.
With that said, guys, we're done with January and February. Let's get to the chaser, talk about our favorite part of the 7 weeks of TV plus Sunday Bloody Sunday, and talk about what we like most about this 2 months in 1994 Smoky Mountain Wrestling. Let's get to the chaser.
The chaser.
All right, as we say goodbye on our first 2 months of 1994, let's start with Colton, your favorite of this 2 months of TV. We had a lot to jam pack in. It could just be something you pulled away. Like, this is what I liked about Smoky Mountain, because there's a lot to unpack.
Yeah, man, there is a whole lot to unpack. I think if I had to pick one thing, even though it wasn't the best payoff in the storyline, I loved the angle of the attack on Ricky Morton's dad and kind of bringing that real world, like bringing the outside family. Because I mean, the setup for that, if guys go back and watch that episode, because earlier in the episode, what happens is Robert Gibson hands basically they do an interview with Dutch and Bob in the beginning of the show. And as they're walking off, Robert Gibson hands a letter to Bob, and he reads it, and he's like, oh, the Rock and Roll Express didn't get a chance to go home for Christmas. They've been running the road so much. So we actually have a surprise for Ricky. His dad's here tonight. He hasn't seen his dad in a long time. This is going to be so cool that he gets to be here and see us, pick up a win. And then, obviously, Cornette and the Heavenly Bodies pick up on that and, go out back there and beat the shit out of his dad. Who knows? It's also, we hear that his dad maybe tried to swing on Cornette first. Wouldn't be surprised. But yeah, I just love that real element of incorporating Ricky Morton's family. And also shout out to Paul Morton for having the willingness to be a part of a storyline there. I think that's just really cool. It just really, really definitely added it. That was a real classic Southern wrestling to me. It was got my gold star for the 2 months for sure.
I love it. Mike Belcaster, on your end, what did you pull away from this?
Oh man, there was so much, as always, because we go, we're so used to doing this. That's crazy. But I mean, there's a few things I'll give a little takeaways from. Louis Spicolli debut, Terry Funk doing the moonsault. So much good shit. Jim Cornette being in every little which direction possible. And then, my main thing is just watching the cadences and the vibe that Chris Candido is just standing out there so strongly with, as you said, very likened to a modern day MJF, but I mean, we're 30 years ago. It's insane. So damn good. And just, it's a fun way to relive history, and this is gearing up to be one of my favorite seasons of Shot of Nostalgia already.
Yeah, my choice has to be very similar to what you said about Chris Candido. I'm going to pull away the Tracy Smothers match Sunday Bloody Sunday, but also every time Chris Candido was on our screen, had me feeling a little bit sad and melancholy about what could have been with Chris Candido if he was still around today. He was still young when he passed. I mean, so he would still be contributing in some way to professional wrestling if he was still able and healthy. So seeing him, the fact that he's not gone, and seeing this side of him, because we're so used to seeing him on the ECW side, we're exposed to that version of him. But even on the side, when he was at WWF, there's a lot to be said about Chris Candido's contributions to the wrestling business, and his contributions live on. And it's going to be through guys like MJF, people studying tape, but also through fans able to watch what he's able to bring to the table. And it shows that he was ahead of his time. As we've said before, 1994 is 28 years ago. It's a long time ago. And he was doing stuff that we see in today and interacting with the crowd the same way. And just his interactions and his whole demeanor was, he could be on a roster today, put him on AEW or WWE. He felt like he could just exist. And I'm sure he could teach guys a thing or two about working the crowd. So shout out to Chris Candido. I'm looking forward to watching him grow throughout this year in 1994. And I'm also very much excited for the Thrill Seekers and seeing what other WWF roster has to offer. But this was a goddamn blast, guys. This was so much fun for our first episode. I didn't know how it would go. I mean, covering all this stuff, but as always, man, we fit it in, and what a good conversation it was.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I couldn't be happier with where we are. It's going to be a great time.
So with that said, let's close the tab. Let's preview next week. Let's get into what's happening the rest of the week on the Tavern, and give our shilling in, and let's talk about the Kentucky Waterfall that's being showcased very soon in a mullet competition. Let's close the tab.
Closing the tab.
All right, the bar lights are coming on. We're getting ready to close out our tab, but next week's show is going to be episode 2 of season 4, 7/14/23. Believe it or not, man, we're like cruising through July already. We're going to be covering March and April at full length of Smoky Mountain Wrestling, the newsletters, the supercards, the TV tapings, everything Smoky Mountain Wrestling would happen in March and April. We got you covered. Make sure you guys go to theturnbuckletavern.com for all your things, everything you need as far as wrestling goes, man. We got you covered from point A to point B. Turnbuckletavern.com. Subscribe. Make sure you guys leave a review on Spotify. If you want to be involved in the Tavern in some way, call the Tavern. The flagship show, they'll feature you. They're not even going to listen to it before you even get on there. So say whatever you want. You want to talk about Smoky Mountain? You want to talk about AEW, WWE, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Talk about it. But that being said, we got about 5 minutes to go. Colton, get your shit in. Talk about @mullet.mania. What's going on your end?
Mullet.mania on Instagram. Keep your eyes peeled there. I've got a mullet competition I'm entering I believe registration is in August. So it's Mullet Champ USA is the Instagram profile. They're wrapping up the teen and kids mullet competition entries right now. So I think, tomorrow's the last day, or actually, as we're recording this, I think today's actually the last day for the teen and kids entries. So I've got some professional photos coming up, and we've speaking of the Tavern, I think we've actually got more Instagram followers in the Tavern than Mullet Champ USA does. So let's bring home let's bring home this trophy.
I would love, dude, if we could include a section on this show showcasing the mullet and the progression. Yeah. If that's going to fit the timeline throughout July and August, I would love to do it.
We definitely do it late July. We still got we've got a couple weeks before it starts really taking off. Also too, I don't know, for those of you that keep up with us on Brace for Impact, my hairdresser just had a baby, so she's actually on she's on maternity leave until end of July, beginning of August. So I'll get freshened up just in time to have this entry. But yeah, man, I've been filling in. Chad's been taking a break from the debate. So he's actually going to be coming back this week, but I'm going to be on there as a guest. It'll be me, Sneed, Chad, and Tom coming up. So I've been on the debate the last couple of weeks. Also, we're Ace, you and I are having an absolute fucking ball covering Impact on Brace for Impact on Thursdays. We're really kind of locking it in, man. We're getting on there just right after Raw down. So on YouTube, be posted up and ready for us to get your fix for Impact at around 10:10, 10:15, and then audio drop the next day. So like we said, we come check us out. Where Impact's been a great, very consistent, enjoyable product, and we got 2 more weeks until Slammiversary. So there's going to be more good shit coming down.
Mike Belcaster, lead us out, do the Excalibur little sell job for us, the elevator pitch, if you will, and get us out of here within 2 minutes.
No, absolutely. It's 4th of July weekend, man. God bless America. Not a better way to say it than, Smoky Mountain Wrestling. God damn it. Fig Night was preeminent. We didn't do Fig Night because 4th of July fell on it, so we're just rocking and rolling. We just started the new and improved Sunday All Elite wrap up. So guys, tune in late night Sundays. Right before you guys get your bedtime little fix, we'll be covering Dynamite, Collision, everything in between. If there's a pay-per-view, we're going live after, so you'll get that fresh thoughts right out of the bank, man. But as Jim Cornette would say, get on your belly, get your ass over here, lick my toes, and tune in next week, motherfucker.